Yes, sir, they're ready.
They're ready, okay. I'd like to call this meeting of the Centennial School District Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Adams?
Here.
Mrs. Brancato? Mr. Dixon? Mr. Goddixson?
Here.
Mr. Kleinschmidt?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Pellegrino? Dr. Pollock?
Present.
Mr. Shafter? Mr. Dixon? 7 members present.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, announcements. By way of announcements, I went to the PSBA conference Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I went to a work session on transgender experience, and I checked that our policy does cover non-discrimination and sexual orientation, and that code should be gender neutral with 2 things there. I went to a leadership study on school community change starting times, especially for secondary students, and I'll get back to that in a minute. And also, we did a presentation to the conference. There was a number of us from here that did that, and that went over very well. And policy on equity was interesting. Only 4, from what they said, only 4 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania have a policy on equity, Upper Dublin being one. I don't know if we are or are not, do we have one? But if we don't, we should at least look into that and look into what Upper Dublin has as their policy and look at it. So maybe that's something we want to do. Also, for those of you out there, you hear us constantly talking about taxes and how pensions are killing school districts, municipalities, etc. One of the things that I found very interesting was a statistic that pensions in the last 15 years, that's between 2002 and 2017, and that's during the fiscal years, employer pension costs have increased 3,500% in 15 years. I don't know anything else that has increased 3,500%, salaries, anything, in that 15-year period. That's why all the people all the governments that are working under this have been having all sorts of problems with the pensions. So it was a very interesting conference. I thought I got a lot out of it, and I am going to be bringing one thing back. I'm going to be forming a committee. The committee will be on start times, especially for secondary students, but that might impact a little bit elementary. We are getting a number of information about it. I will put Mr. Kleinschmidt as chair of that committee. If any board members would like to serve on that, see Mr. Kleinschmidt. I would like Dr. Pollinchek to be on the committee. We need to make sure that what happens, happens. I will give you some parameters. First of all, it shouldn't cost, whatever we do, if we do anything, it shouldn't cost more than $100,000. Unionville Chairs Ford, which is a little smaller than us, they were figuring 30 to 40,000. their first-year course ended up being, they did some change, their first-year course ended up being $2,500. So I hope we'll be close to the 2,500 figure than the 10,000, the 100,000 figure. I would like principals involved. I think we need the AD involved. When the meetings are will be up to Mr. Kleinschmidt. I want to report back. I think we should have some parents, some community members, some teachers on this committee. I also want to make sure it's very transparent. On our website, I would like all the information that the committee gets about this, and we've already dug in and have a number of things that we've received about what other school districts are doing, and I would like the minutes of each meeting put on our website so that the community knows what's happening. If any community member is interested in being on this, please call the district office, either Dr. Bohr or Dr. Polinchek, and we will see about getting you on this. I think this is something that, according to the AMA, the American Psychological Association, and the Association of Psychiatrists, they say that secondary students should not start as early as most high schools and middle schools in the country are starting them. So I'll give you a choice, Mr. Kleinschmidt. Your committee can either have all students go at the same time or not do anything to change anything, or anything in between. So you got a lot of latitude there with that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay? But I want to make sure that we have a diverse committee, and it's very transparent to the public. Does anybody have anything to say about this? Mr. Miller?
Not about that particular, I was going to ask to make an additional announcement.
Okay, anything else about this? Okay? Don't know where it's going to lead us? Oh, I would like a report finished in about 15 months. Okay?
Okay, we'll make that a goal.
Make that a goal. Anything else on this? Okay, any other announcements? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I also attended the conference. I attended the Khan Academy session, of course. I attended teacher shortage, an equity session, and Classroom of the Future. Dr. Pollock and I also attended the delegate assembly.
Okay, anybody have anything else? No other announcements? Okay, community comments. I don't have any community comments. Up there, please. Thank you. Name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
3, not 2. That's
3,
good.
we changed it
Bob
last month.
Schaefer,
didn't we?
1150 Mill Creek Road,
Okay.
Southampton. That issue of potentially changing the secondary school, coming to school time, what the motivation is, some report or some information from medical people? What do they say, that the
Can
kids
you turn
aren't?
that on? We can't hear you. It's on? Is the light on? Can you speak into the mic? It's a little hard.
1, 2, 3, I'm yelling.
Okay,
Can you hear?
Yep.
Well, I'm shouting now.
thank you.
What does this illustrious medical outfit say? That the kids aren't awake yet, or they get not enough sleep, or what is it?
From what I've gathered, okay, and I'm not an expert, so
Me neither.
but from what I gather, teenagers need 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night, is what they're saying. And one of the problems that teenagers have physiologically is that because of their makeup, it's very difficult for them to get to sleep before 11 o'clock. That's what they're saying.
Okay.
And apparently there's medical evidence to support this.
In spite of the fact for hundreds of years, we've had this start time.
Yeah. And I went through start times and all that too, and I'm sure
Okay.
you did, but this is what they're saying.
All right.
That it would be beneficial for the start times for secondary students to start later than they do now.
I got
It
it.
would help them.
But this could bump, like sporting events, if you're going to push
There's
the...
all sorts of things that we need to look at, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I know Unionville, Chadds Ford, the one group that made the presentation, what they did, they moved it 25 minutes. That's all they really could with everything. They wanted to look at an hour, but it just wouldn't work with all the other things. So, we can look at anywhere from nothing to whatever. Yes,
Are you talking about middle school or high school?
both. Secondary students.
So the reason why they can't go to bed before 11 o'clock is because they don't put their cell phones down.
No, that's not true.
Dr. Pollock, I raised 8 kids.
Yes, I know,
a thing
and
or two
that's
about
not true
teenagers.
according to the Medical Association. And if you have a MD, that you're an MD, and you can refute this, that's fine.
I don't need an MD to know.
Well,
that
that's what
kids
the
don't-
Medical Association and the Psychology Association are saying.
Why don't we just ask moms?
Yeah, Terry.
Yes.
I think to speak to a little bit what you just asked about, yes, I do think kids are on their cell phones a lot, but I also think that our high school kids, in order to get into university, they have to do so much more these days to be considered because they have the Common Application. So our kids can really apply to like 20 schools in a way that's much faster than even when I had to apply to college. So what that's doing is it's making it a lot more competitive. Our kids have after-school activities in addition to sports. They have jobs. By the time they get home and eat dinner, they still have homework to do. A lot of my students are up to 1, 2 in the morning. And yes, some of them are up to 1, 2 in the morning because in between each assignment, they're texting their friends or they're perusing social media. Guilty as well. I am. But the other thing that I think is really beneficial to this is that as a single mother with an elementary school kid, I have had to pay a ridiculous amount of money to get my kid to before school care because I have to leave for work before 9 o'clock when elementary school starts. So getting that hour, 2 hours of time has cost me thousands of dollars. If my son were going to school at elementary, like if we just switched the times, I would never have had to do that. He would just be up when I was up. I could get him out the door. I could get him to school. That saves me a huge amount of money. Whereas now he's going into middle school, I trust him to get up and do what he needs to do by himself because he's older. So for me, this has always just been a logical thing, even if there were no benefits to their medical condition, which I think there are, but even if there weren't, just logistically, it's easier for families.
And there are a number of districts looking into this. Central Bucks may be going to some different times next year or the year after. There are other districts around the state that are also looking at this. So all I'm asking is that we examine it. And if we examine it and find there's a better way, then we need to take action. If there's not, then we don't. Yes, Dr. Whitaker.
I just wanted to say I am the PhD in clinical psychology, so I can answer that question. And I was a part of some of the seminars of those studies, and the issue is they found through CAT scans that the teenage brain is not developing with the short amount of time of sleep that they have. And then also it takes them about a couple hours before they can really get to like REM. So if they get to bed, after doing homework, say they get to bed at 9, they're not really getting any rest until about 11 o'clock. So you're getting about 5 hours of sleep. And over time, studies have shown that their brain doesn't function to its best capability. It's almost like they are suffering like a small concussion over time. It could happen to some students. So it impacts executive functioning and memory and also emotional liability as well. So that's information that I know in regards to lack of sleep.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yes.
I'd just like to thank Dr. Whitaker for volunteering to be on the committee. Thank you, sir.
And I do want to make sure that we get, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, that we get material on the web, on our website, so that people who aren't on the committee can click on and find out all the information that the committee has. I think that's important. Okay? Anything else? Any other announcements? Okay. New business. Mr. Shafter is not here. Mr. Kleinschmidt, would you take over for Mr. Shafter tonight?
Sure. Under new business, 2.1, be it resolved that the Centennial School District Board of School Directors approves the revision to the teacher leader positions approved at the September 25th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting as per the attached.
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 8-0. Okay, education presentation, Mr. Kleinschmidt.
Okay. I see Dr. Polinchuk is getting up to eagerly assist, and it's greatly appreciated.
Okay. We have a few presentations this evening. The first presentation is, asked Ms. Coles if she would come up and join me here at the podium. Get this set up.
Is that mic on?
It should be. Is it? Okay. Yeah, I think
I just saw you were asking for the volume.
I don't think it works in terms of amplifying.
Yeah.
It doesn't amplify volume in here, but it picks up for the cable channel and the recording. Okay.
Talk up nice and loud.
I will.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored to come and stand before you tonight to present a comparative study of the full-day kindergarten program. We had 2016-17, we had, of course, our last half-day kindergarten. And 2017-18 was our first year of our full-day kindergarten. And I'm going to share some of the results, and thank you in advance for the gift of time. Coming from another district to here, I was wondering how, with all the resources and the dedicated teachers that we have in Centennial, why our data was what it was. And you'll see by you voting and spending the time to really study the need for full-day kindergarten, you'll see some of the results we've had even in our first year. And it aligns to the superintendent's goals of making sure our students are reading at or above grade level by third grade. Oh, scroll. Oh, okay. There we go. So our full-day kindergarten, the gift of time is what we're calling this. 27% more students left kindergarten at or above the reading benchmark for last year. 19% fewer students left at below kindergarten. And you're looking at it and you're like, oh, that's not significant. But when you look at the school-wide data, this is the average, you'll see why the results are impressive. If you look at Davis, the students left, we had 62% leaving at or above reading level with the half-day program. In 2017, with our full-day program, we had 75% of our students leaving at or above reading level. But with the most impressive part, when you speak with the reading specialist, is that of that, 38% of the 75% left reading kindergarten at the first grade mid-year level. So they left kindergarten reading where they should be reading right now. That is impressive. When you look at McDonald had 38% of their students with the half-day program leaving kindergarten at or above. But with the gift of time, they had 61% of their students reading at or above grade level. And then when you look at Willowdale, it's staggering. 19% with the half-day program were leaving kindergarten at or above level, and that went up to 70% of their students leaving at or above reading level. And of their 70%, they have 41% of those children leaving kindergarten in June where they should be at right now. So we thank you for investing in our students and giving them the time. And we know that over time, as the teachers work with the full day program, that the results will become more and more impressive. So you have your first graders now starting at a higher level than they were with the half-day program, which then each year will build. So our first grade students now are reading well above where they should have been. And when you walk into classrooms, you'll see this. And so I would like to also invite any of you who have some time in your hands to join me in visiting some of our kindergarten classrooms so that you can see it in person. I know I only have 3 minutes. I tried to do it quickly. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Miller has
Yes,
his hand
Mr.
up.
Miller.
Before
Pollock.
you go, one of the things that the community and especially the new members of the board need to know, Mr. Miller and I have been fighting in this district to try to get full-day kindergarten for 10 years before it finally happened last year. And it's been a real struggle over the last 10 years to try to get it. And this just shows, and we knew it, this
Yes.
just shows how valuable the full-day kindergarten is.
Yes. Some of the comments from the teachers are that they have the time, as an administrator, elementary administrator last year, you go into, when we had the half-day programs, the teachers were teaching, and they were teaching, but they had to hit so many things, so it was like popcorn. But now they can take the time to really develop the concepts and develop the skills that the kids need to be successful.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I was going to credit Dr. Pollock with the impetus. We attended several meetings up in State College. We worked with the Office of Early Childhood Development and the Office of Childhood Development and Early Learning, which no longer even exists. Ochdell was the leader, and the one thing they kept stressing to us over and over again is that there is a point where children go from learning to read, or from reading to learn, learning to read to reading to learn, and the earlier that occurs, the better they do throughout their school career. So, seeing this data, it's just staggering and well on our way.
Yes.
I can't wait to see where they are by third grade. Are we going to keep track of longitudinal data?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely. So
Mr.
again,
Adams?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Adams and Mr. Dixon.
So let's not forget Mrs. Morgan, who was probably your swing vote that got that over the hump when you guys were pushing it for so many years. So Mrs. Morgan was a big advocate for full-day kindergarten when she was on the board. And, of course, our new administration, so it takes a whole group of people to push that across the finish line.
Mr. Dixon.
These results are really impressive. I do have one question, and I'm just curious. The Willowdale one is so dramatic. Like, was it really just the half-day versus full-day question? Because, I mean, you look at the first one, it's about a 13% jump. The second one, it's about a 23% jump. This is, 51%. That's a lot. I'm just, is that really the only, or is there something else going on? I mean, just so much more, like, wow, that I have to wonder.
My answer would be yes, because I haven't been a kindergarten teacher, and I've been a kindergarten teacher in an area where they didn't have even some of the resources that we have in Centennial. And we would have children leaving kindergarten at or above level. And it really is that time to really invest with the students, taking the time to develop the concepts and skills. Like I said, a lot of the schools, we have buddy readers, where we've had like our 5th grade students coming in and reading to our younger students. So there, in addition to the time spent on the academic piece, we've had some programs and things in place to provide the additional support. The parents really, this was something that the parents really wanted. So we had a huge investment from the parents, making sure that if there was a need, that the needs were addressed. A lot of interventions. We also started our MTSS program last year. So if a student wasn't making the necessary, meeting the necessary results that we were intended, we would have conversations about the students. I'll tell you, like I said, I was at Davis. I had an intervention group. I was working with students during the course of the day. So there were a lot of things at play to help with these results over a time. Specifically speaking of Willowdale, I can see how it could happen with the extra time and supports that we had in place here.
Sure.
Yeah, to answer Mr. Dixon's question, there are a couple other things happening. Number one, the teachers in the kindergarten have really bought into the full-day math. They had meetings the year before last on what to do and what schedule and all that. So that's one thing. They were really ready for it when it happened. The second thing is we have the Khan Academy there, which is basically for math, but, you know, in math, you got to do reading. You got to read, too. So that helps. So it's everything all wrapped together that has helped. And now a number of those things are spreading to the other elementary schools. And even though they're doing a great job, you know, we hope that they will catch up to Willowdale in some of the things that they're doing.
Well, I mean, I'm just, comparing, like, for example, Davis to Willowdale. I mean, I would have been pretty happy with a 13% jump, to be honest with you. So 51% was like, wow, that's amazing. So, all right.
I think it's important to realize that anytime you get, to your point, a 5 to 10% jump, that's a big lift in education. So these are fantastic results. The big challenge for the Learning and Innovation team is to keep it rolling up, and that's part of the reason we'll be tracking the longitudinal data. But one of the big, when we started looking at this, it's okay, now what are we doing to challenge in first grade? What are we doing to create this wave to keep rolling forward? Right, and that's often where the data, and Mrs. Morgan pointed this out when we were studying this, a lot of times the data gets commingled, right? So you take all the 3rd graders and you have a transient population, and next thing you know, it's hard to know who had first day K and who had full day K and who had half day K, because everybody's reverting to the mean. But when you adjust for that, the kids who had full day K tend to earn more, tend to go to better colleges, tend to stay married longer, tend not to be in the penal system. So full day K has a huge research underpinning to it, which was part of the reason that the committee that studied it was able to recommend to this board to go for full day K. The challenge for the district, which our Office of Learning and Innovation has wrapped around and grabbed hold of, is how to keep that wave, this wave, moving forward, right? How do we challenge our first graders? And next year, how do we challenge our second graders, right? And what's going to be fantastic for our middle school and our high school principal is as these kids start hitting their schools, the very nature of the education is going to change. So a dollar spent, at this point is a huge investment in the success of our kids long term. So, I'm really pleased to have this presentation. And but I just wanted to say that, the district is viewing this as a long-term proposition, and we're excited to have this challenge and this wave, and we're looking forward to meeting it and keeping our first graders engaged. So next year's presentation will be kindergarten and first grade.
Thank you, Dr. Well, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Wall says is great, and what I'd like to see included in that longitudinal data to the extent that we can. I know, the dollars sometimes are difficult to identify where they are being spent, but if we can get some sort of a ballpark on what we're saving in remediation in future years because of the better start that students are getting. it may not be feasible, but if we can, I'd like to be able to see how it's working for us. I think we're going to find we recovered the cost of full-day kindergarten in savings on remediation.
We'll certainly look into that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Oh,
I'm a firm believer in research and what it shows. Two things. One is when we were examining this, one of the things that I was impressed by was that when you look at data, not here, but full-day kindergarten data for people, schools that have done them for long periods of time, they have shown that this is one of the things schools can do to make sure that students are successful for the next 12, 15, 20 years and more. And they have shown that in research. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to form this committee on school times, because research has shown that that makes a difference to secondary students. So if research is showing these things, we should be looking at and doing them.
Mrs. Coles, thank you very much. I think you're off the hook right now.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Coles. Next up, we have Dr. Best. He's going to present some very encouraging data regarding our pilot SAT program that we ran last year.
So SAT scores at William Tennant High School really haven't changed in about 20 years. And we tried for cohorts, that is, a few different things to get at that, to give our students the opportunity to perform better on that assessment, because we view that assessment as one that matters and that it actually opens doors for kids in terms of where they go to school, should they choose to go to school, and what type of schools they're able to get into. So fortunately, right around the same time we were looking to make some changes, the Khan Academy partnered with the College Board so that students could create free individualized practice programs for the SAT. So we thought, if we created a course where the students would basically practice for the SAT and we'd issue them credit for their efforts, they would have the opportunity to look at a different tier of schools possibly, or look at school period. So the way that this works is very simple. At the cost of the district, we give all of our 10th grade students the PSAT in October of their 10th grade year. Students who choose to can register for this course as a sophomore or as a junior as an elective. We don't mandate this for everyone because not all of our students are going to college. If they're going into the trades or other areas, this isn't of great value for them. If they do register for the class, they link their Khan Academy and College Board accounts, and it creates a personalized practice program for them based on how they performed on the PSAT. So to make it very simple, if Mary Ann Robold and I were in the same SAT prep class, we may be sitting next to each other, but the majority of my time may be spent on the math side of the test, while the majority of her side may be spent on the reading side of the test based on how we performed on the SAT. We schedule the courses with secondary English and mathematics teachers, and we rotate them through the different sections so they can provide individualized assistance for students in the classroom. All of this is made possible by our Chromebook one-to-one initiative so that all students are able to access the platform at all times during class. So in our first pilot, we had 108 students go through the course. We have data on 86 of them. There are 22 that have not yet sat for the SAT for a multitude of reasons. If you take a look at this graphic, you can see that well over half of the students, nearly 65%, jumped 100 points or more from their PSAT score to their SAT score. 44% of them grew 150 points or more. We had some students, we had 1 in every 5 students grew over 200 points from their PSAT to their SAT. I do not want to sound dramatic, but for these students growing 100, 150, 200 points, it's literally opening doors for them at the university level that would not be open to them otherwise had they not increased their scores. And the exciting thing about this course is that we now are up to 8 sections we're running this year. We have nearly 130 students enrolled this year. A quarter of our junior class is currently enrolled in this course, and they will be taking the SAT this year as well. Keep in mind, again, that not all of our students are college-bound for a multitude of reasons, so this class wouldn't be of interest to them. But for the students who are, it's a great way for them to spend their time during the school day getting ready for an exam that can help them get into the school they'd like to. Any questions?
Mr. Dixon?
A brief anecdote. When I was in high school, I took the PSAT, and I was fortunate enough that my father, who also taught high school in the Archdiocesan system, for extra money, worked for a man named Dr. Leonard Viola, you may remember him, who ran an SAT prep course. As a result, I got to take it for free since my father was an employee, and when I took, I got a certain score on the PSAT, took that prep course, and then I got a dramatically higher score on the SAT. And it was then that I learned that the SAT measures more than anything else the resources of the people behind the kid to pay for such things. That the district is taking this and doing this and providing it to our students. I can't tell you how tremendous I think this is, even at a time when, yes, I think appropriately so, we're raising some very serious questions about standardized testing and what it measures and how good of a metric it is in terms of deciding who should or should not have these doors open for them. But the reality is it's still a metric, it's still being used, it still has a stigma attached to it, if nothing else. This is great, and I can't even, great that this is being done for the students in our district, because I knew I was just lucky that my dad had this, and there are so many kids who don't have that kind of access, and for our district to do this, I love this. That's all.
Thank you.
Ms. Pellegrino?
So I teach the SAT prep course for the language arts part of it, the reading and the writing, even though the writing, they're just the essays. Sometimes they want to take that part and sometimes they don't. And the same thing, we have the same kind of results. The kids that take the class, they all get, 50 to 100, sometimes even that 300 points higher just from having that, just from having practice. That's it, just understanding how the test works. Because this is offered in school as an elective, I'm wondering if maybe that prevents some students from taking it because they might want to take something else instead. And I know that life is all about choices, but we do ours after school. It's from 3 to 5, 3 days a week, and we do it for like a 6-week period. I'm wondering if that's something that we could consider doing as well, just for those kids that might not want to take it as a class because they want something else for college, but they'd still have that opportunity. And then, give the teacher a stipend. That's what I get, a little stipend for doing it. It's a couple hours after school, and it just increases the amount of kids that might want to do it. That would just be my suggestion.
That was an initial consideration, but we quickly moved away from it because of the obligations our students have after school. In addition to activities, we probably have the most employed student body in all of Pennsylvania, I feel like. With the new schedule where the students have an alternate 8-day schedule, giving up a quarter elective for an opportunity like this, we don't see that as a barrier to anyone.
Right.
Oh, okay. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, so we're all saying the same thing, so I won't take much time. The kids who take classes, they instantly, just from the people who teach these classes, they teach them how to take it, they teach them, even without teaching them the questions, you just teach them how to take the test. It's simple. The kids that take the test get higher scores, so it's a fantastic idea. They score higher. It's a great idea. And I'll just go on the coattails of what these two guys just said.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Goodixon?
If I could just
guess
respond to
that's really
Mr. Adams for a moment. The other thing to keep in mind, different than the traditional SAT classes that we took when we were in high school, the program that each student has is tailored specifically for them based on their results. So instead of casting a wide net of today's math day, tomorrow's reading day, the students work on areas where they demonstrate a need for growth and spend less time on areas that they've clearly mastered. So that's what makes this so unique.
I guess my question is really leading more into is it possible to increase the number of sections that's being offered for this, doubling the number of students that can take the course?
Sure. I mean, we can add as many sections as needed in the way we schedule. It's an interest-based course that we're pushing for kids, and a lot of our students who don't see a value in it if they're going to go to technical school and the SAT is not as critical as their NOCTI score, or if they're going into the military and they're taking the ASVAB, they may not see the SAT as important. We want to be careful not to force those students into the classes.
But even if we're doubling, we're still only reaching about half of the class?
Yep. Yeah.
Wait, no, you got a couple more to go, buddy. Sorry. Ms. Pellegrino.
I just wanted to know if you did anything, and I know I sound like I'm pushing standardized tests, and believe me, I don't care about them that much. But like Andrew said, this is kind of like a thing that they just have to do. And when they do well on the PSAT, they can have the opportunity to be a National Merit Scholar. Do we do anything in the 10th grade to kind of get them ready for the PSAT? Like if they want that opportunity, they have access to it?
We tell them about it. They take it about the 5th week into school in 10th grade. So in ninth grade, we make them more aware of it. We also do encourage juniors who want to try and qualify for National Merit Scholarship to join on to that same testing day. We give it to them at a discounted rate. I believe it's $20, and they also take it in during the school day.
Mr. Go-Dixon? Oh, you got yours? Okay. Mr. Miller?
And Dr. Best, for the people listening at home, not including the cost of one-to-one, which is covering many areas, what was the incremental cost for this program?
It's free.
How about that?
Yeah, it's nice. And if I could go back to Ms. Pellegrino for 1 second, in our mandatory 9th grade academic seminar course, the students work through a series of college readiness modules, and one of them pertains to the PSAT.
I heard correctly that the district is paying, right, for everyone to take the PSAT?
Yes.
So everybody does take that test.
Yeah.
And I want to be careful here because I am a big believer, among other things, in, I've said this here at meetings before, that when I was in high school, I think sometimes the technical school and the trades were treated as something somehow beneath the dignity of people, and they should not be that at all. And I'm very happy that there are students who are doing that. Having said that, when I went to high school, we did not get to take. Well, did we get to take? Maybe we did get to take it for free. I don't remember. But what I do remember is that if you have this, what I'm thinking is if you have this program, I mean, I'm wondering, again, just echoing what everyone's been saying about trying to put, because he may be a kid who maybe is not thinking of themselves as college, maybe that's not the direction they want to go in. They shouldn't be pushed, but at the same time, when this is here, available, free, go take it. Because if you got it, what's the harm almost, right? If you got a some score at the PSAT, and now you have the opportunity to take a course like this, because you're exactly right. All they're really teaching you is how to take the test, and they're teaching you some of the other things too. But I mean, a lot of it is about test taking strategy. Maybe people who had not thought in that direction would, and I think that that's valuable, even just for kids to have as many doors open in front of them as possible.
Dr. Pollock?
Just for the audience out there.
When we get through the board questions,
For the audience out there, if our students were going to take this outside and pay for it, the usual cost is anywhere from $600 to $1,200. So any student who's taking it here, their parents are saving that much if they want them to take an SAT prep course that they had to pay for.
Yeah.
And they don't get the specialized attachment.
So,
Ms. Pellegrino?
What percentage of our students go on to a 4-year university?
Roughly in a given year, 84 to 88% of our students go on to college. However, I would say that more than half of them start out at a 2-year college, usually Bucks, for financial reasons.
community member.
Oh, okay. Mr. Schaefer, if you want to.
Well, we have
I know. That's why I was just going to say to Mr. Schaefer that, thank you. Go ahead, name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Peggy Ann Camerata, 91 Buchanan Way, Warminster. My only question, I'm not saying this isn't good, the course, my question is, do we have any data from before they took the course? Because the SATs is a test that your score will go up just by the amount of times you take it. So you would have probably seen an increase from the PSATs to the SATs anyway. So not, like I said, I'm not saying it's not good to offer this course. I'm just curious to see what the actual change was from the course, not just from taking the PSATs and then the SATs.
Does Dr. Best to have an answer to that, it appears?
Yes, and the answer to that is no, their scores did not increase. We didn't offer a formal training program for our students, and in surveying our student body, talking to families, a lot of kids weren't practicing for the test. So they would take the test in 10th grade at the beginning, and then they wouldn't practice, and then they would take the SAT somewhere in their junior year, maybe winter or spring. So there was actually regression or stagnant scores often. And as I mentioned earlier, our cohort scores remained pretty flat for a 20-year period of time when factoring in the change in the overall score when they went from 1,600 to 2,400 back to 1,600. So no, I don't think it's accurate that students will naturally just increase their score. In anything in life, intentional practice will make you better at what you're doing. And that is factual.
Okay, Mr. Schaefer, name, address, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Bob Schaefer, 1150 Mill Creek Road, Southampton. I'm just curious how the SAT sits with the anti-high-stakes test crowd. I mean, Pennsylvania's getting rid of Keystone exams because of this corporation that's killing all meaningful tests, standardized tests. So here we have the SAT, and I hope the SAT stands, but is there any feeling that someday the SAT will disappear?
I can provide some information. There's always a concern about high-stakes tests. I think when we're looking at PSSAs and Keystones, it's because those scores are used to measure the effectiveness and the health of the school district and the education the students are getting. And they can be different depending upon the state because states use different tests. SATs are consistent. Students in Pennsylvania, students in Washington State are taking the same assessment. It's really up to the college as to how much they're going to weigh those scores. They're a predictor of student success in their freshman year. It's not a predictor of how the students will fare in all 4 years or if they'll graduate, but in terms of their retention of students as freshmen, it's a pretty good indicator of how they'll do. Some colleges have moved away from using the SAT at all, and they're looking at GPAs, they're looking at interviews, they're looking at well-rounded students. It really depends on the college, but it's still a test that helps students at least refine the list of schools that they should be looking at to see if that's a good match for them. And if they have pretty decent SAT scores, more doors are open to them. That's what we're saying, is that some kids that might have not considered a certain tier of school, or even some financial aid is dependent upon this as well too. So this can be another factor that goes into that package that's offered to the student and how much they and their parents would have to outlay for that education.
Mr. Adams?
Okay. Yeah, just real quick as a point of reference, I'm one of those parents who spent all that money, as Dr. Pollack was saying, for both my kids when they were attended, one with a private person to teach them, and another one with one of the larger Huntington Learning Center to tutor them. And the significance between the PSATs and the SATs are tremendous when you have somebody who knows how to teach them to take that test. Mm-hmm. And the final result is great, and it costs a lot of money. So I wasn't going to say that, but I'll say it if anybody needs to hear it, that the amount of money that you save by taking this course is tremendous, and the results are fantastic.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Best. We're moving on to our next topic.
Okay. Next topic is Mr. Golderer, who will be here. This is a presentation, both he and Mr. Ford, who is the acting principal at Klinger Middle School until Martin Hayes begins, developed for their approach to addressing the bullying issues that we do have amongst middle school students in a very proactive way.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So over the summer, we were tasked with coming up with a comprehensive plan how to address bullying in the middle school level. So between myself and Mr. Ford, along with our counselors at the two schools at Klinger and Log, we came up with a plan to first and foremost just to address with everyone exactly what we were looking at. So I'm not going to read this for you, but you can see it. One of the things that we want people at home and everyone in our schools to be aware of is that there is a difference between bullying and an incident or an argument. And this is something that comes up very often in our position, is if a student goes up and makes a comment to another student, we'll immediately field a phone call of my son or my daughter was bullied today. And just to kind of stress the pervasiveness that goes into it, and that it's something that's typically done on a repeat stage, and it involves an imbalance of power. So we wanted to put that out there, and we also wanted to share the ARs that the district already has in place. One of the things it's good for everyone to know is that the district already has a lot of policies in place to address bullying, and these are effective. This was our chance, however, to be both reactive and proactive with many of the different opportunities that were out there. And just as Dr. Best alluded to how the program was free, essentially, that they worked on within the high school to have results on the SAT, there are a lot of resources that are available, again, at no expense for the middle schools, that we were able to implement some of this. So some of the first things that we did were we put out some surveys with our students early in the year, and these were developed from the California Forum, and we tailored them to fit our schools. We received feedback just to kind of measure the climate in our buildings and see where our students were coming from and how they felt being in our schools. We also look to develop school culture and climate teams within the building, and these are made up of our staff as well as our students. We created a reporting form, and this is now on the Log and Klinger pages, where if you are a parent, a student, a bystander, and you witness something and you would like to get that to our attention, you can fill this out, and this comes directly to the administrators' email accounts, as well as our counselors, where we can address this head on. Additionally, we're looking at having some presentations because there are experts out there and there are personal stories out there, and we would like these to come to light for our population. We have John Halligan presenting Ryan's story, both at Klinger and at Log College. He'll be at Klinger next week, and then he'll be at Log College in November. If you're unfamiliar with Ryan's story, John Halligan has been presenting this for over 15 years now. His son committed suicide at the hands of bullying, and this was in the earliest stages of cyberbullying just over 15 years ago. He'll be presenting to our students at both of the middle schools, and this is done over a 3-year cycle. So every middle school student in the district will see this during their time. Also, law enforcement, we're looking to have to come in to speak about cyberbullying, social media, and safety. And that is a presentation that will happen in the spring. Also, this is a free program, the Kindness Challenge, and we looked at many different programs before settling on the Kindness Challenge. Why did we do that? Because it was very simple, it was very easy to enact, and it's very effective, and it involves our students directly. The Kindness program is something where we really focus in on a different theme each month. It involves our students. It's coordinated through the announcements. It's coordinated through our teachers stressing these themes. And I have the chart as we go a little bit further on that you can click and see. Actually, is that included in the slides? Okay. And then lastly, Character Lab. We are working with the University of Pennsylvania. We are a model school for them as far as setting up a Character Lab. And this shows evidence-based ways to build character traits in our students. An example would be something like grit or resiliency, where students are taught when something is difficult right away, we don't give up. We learn how to work through these things. A very important skill to learn early on, and it addresses actually a lot of the challenges that students face that could lead to some other problems while they're in school. And like I said earlier, we have a lot of programs that we're already implementing in the school, and if you can't see them from where you're seated, We've had Nova coming in and doing presentations over the past few weeks. Girls Unlimited was in last week to speak to our seventh grade female students. We do have peer group mediation. We have restorative meetings. There's frequent parent communication. We also have our positive behavior system where if you come into log work cleaning or you're going to see our students can earn some prizes essentially for doing really good things within their building. And these are things that we're really proud of. That's a program we have a lot of pride in. We do have our SAP program, and we meet weekly to go over any of our students that may have any types of needs, whether it be for anything ranging from mental health to issues that might be coming from drug, alcoholism, or a sudden drop in grades, attendance, things of that nature. We do have counseling on site, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We have the Peace Center that we work with, who is a great mediator if we have problems that we feel have gone above the resource that we have at the school. And a few years ago, the school implemented Gaggle onto all of our networks within the building. So if a student is typing something that's inappropriate or something that's frankly a little bit frightening, this sends an alert to the administration as well as to our cyber team in our central office so we can address that immediately with our students. Yes?
I was just wondering if you could speak for a moment towards what kinds of program, what do you guys do when you've identified a student who is the bully? Like, how do you intervene with that student to address the behaviors? Because I'm sure for most students who are doing that, it's really coming from a place themselves where there's obviously an unhappiness or something driving the behavior.
Right. So first, I mean, in most cases, it really is an incident, and it's something that happens where we have a conversation. It's usually a phone call home. A lot of times that there is a consequence that's related to that. However, when it's something where it's fully vetted through, and we've interviewed a lot of students, and it is something that's ongoing and pervasive, there is, and that's why I included the AARs in here. There are steps that we have to follow. There are forms that we have to fill out before ultimately assigning some type of consequence to a student.
I'm not necessarily even talking about, there should be consequences.
Sure.
But I meant more like, are there psychological helps for students who themselves, sometimes the kid who's doing the bullying is the one who needs the intervention, not necessarily just punishment, but
Yes.
also, you know what I mean?
Right, and that's why I say when it actually gets to that point, because in most cases it doesn't go there. In most cases, it is a matter of them meeting with myself or one of the assistant principals or a teacher that they're very comfortable with, all the way down to our school psychologist or any of our counselors. So we absolutely look at the mental health side of things, and we do try to address that. And just to be very clear, most cases don't go to that extreme.
Mr. Adams?
Yeah, so with all this stuff, that's great. When a kid gets bullied, they're preteen, teenagers, right? All this goes in one ear and out the other, and they're terrified, and they don't know what to do. It would be good if we had some kind of reminder, some kind of repetition, Like in the middle schools, our main hub is right around the main office there where the kids go to lunch every day. If we could just put a poster there to remind them, hey, if you're being bullied or you witness bully, go on the website and report it. Or like in the morning announcements at the end of every announcement. Remember, if you're being bullied or you witness a bully, go on the website and report it. Just so there's some repetition there that they know what to do in that instance when they're being bullied, Because when kids are bullied, all this stuff, it's just one ear and out the other. They just go crying somewhere and they don't know what to do. So just be nice if there was some kind of reminder somewhere that in that instance they have some kind of solace that they'll know what to do, that they see it every day outside the office, just some kind of poster. You witness it, you see it, it happens to you, go on the website anonymously. Well, not anonymously, but, nobody's going to see you do it when you're doing it, and tell us what's happening.
Right, and I plan we did not set this up, but you actually walked right into something I wanted to mention. But we do have a monthly focus, and that is done through, part of that is included in posters that are put around. Right now, the theme is responsibility within the school. And again, this comes up every day in our announcements with all of our students. So there is that daily reminder. And also our counselors have been making rounds throughout all of the classes so they get the chance to meet with every single one of the students. One of the things that we want to do is be very visible to the students, the people that they can report these things to, so they know who we are, so they know our personalities a little bit, and so they feel comfortable reporting things to us. But thank you, I appreciate that.
Ms. Pellegrino?
One of the things I see here that I really like that we're doing is the school culture and the climate teams. And I really like that we're involving students in that as well, because I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about bullying or we talk about school climate, it's adults talking to kids about what they should do. And if you're a parent or you've ever dealt with children, you know that sometimes you tell them to do something and they don't do it. So my son, the biggest issue that I have with him isn't that he's a bully. He's a nice boy, but he does not stand up for kids when they're being talked to, and I don't know how to impart that wisdom onto him. I don't know how to teach him how to do that. But I think if you get a bunch of kids in the room together and let them think through this, like how is it that we can change our school culture so that we're nicer human beings and the kids are actually the ones driving that, then I think it will catch on. I really do. I think that will be very effective. So I'm glad you're doing that.
And just so you know, there's also some collaboration between Log and Klinger students at this point. There's a kindness club, and there are a lot of messages that you'll see if you're ever in any of the buildings. It can be as simple as Post-its that are outside of individual student lockers, to posters that are around the building, and they do get together and they meet. There is a moderator for that club, and there's also, we've surveyed students to create an additional team that could meet with administration. So we absolutely want the student perspective to be included in this.
Mr. Schaefer, did you have your hand up, or? Okay. Okay.
I have a question, though, where the presentations from NOVA and some of these other organizations is primarily for the students. How much do we offer to families and parents to access some of the same services?
And so anything that usually comes up on an individual basis, it goes through our counseling department. But we are looking to have more parent presentations. Our counselors are looking at a program, I can't remember the name of it right now, that they're doing with Montgomery County Intermediate Unit right now. But in addition to that, we are looking to have law enforcement come in the spring and just talk about some of the dangers that can come along, particularly with cyberbullying.
If I could just quickly add, tomorrow evening, Dr. Whitaker and Ms. Coles are also having a parent presentation on cyberbullying, and that was at the request of some parents. Is one of the things we have to keep in mind, particularly with the cyberbullying, is the kids are using social media and technology in a way that many parents either aren't aware of because it's not a platform that they're using, and they're unaware of the fact that some of these things are happening. So we want to make sure parents are educated and also have access and know that there's certain tools that they can put on their children's phones in order to monitor what it is that they're doing. And that's really important because otherwise some of this stuff goes unreported to anybody. And, a child could really, start to have some serious issues with that. And unfortunately, that can be too late. So we want to make sure everybody can rally around these kids to be able to support them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Golder, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Our next presentation here is a brief enrollment report. And this is an overview of the district enrollment starting back in 2014 through 2018. Enrollment changes on a daily basis, quite honestly, across the district as students withdraw and enroll. So the metric we use is the October 1st count, because that's the count that's reported to the state, and that's the official number of students. So at any given point, the enrollment can change. Over the past 5 years, we've had a decline of 199 students in the district. Now, naturally, students graduate, students also then come in as kindergartners or come in at different grade levels. But over the past 5 years, that's the number of students that we've lost. And this could be for a host of different reasons. They may have gone to a different school, might have chosen a private school, or they may have moved out of the district and no other student would have enrolled to take their place. This is a breakdown of the secondary and elementary trends. So you can see here that over time, with our red line here for secondary, it's been fairly static. Elementary, you can see that there certainly was a decline in 2015, and for the most part, it's been fairly static. And keep in mind that as enrollment may decline in elementary, you may see bubbles going through then into the middle schools and into the high school. And this slide here is a comparison with the change. And overall, our decline in the past 5 years has been 1.52%. A couple of things that are important of note in this slide, and I don't want to go through all of the numbers, but from 2017 to 18, we had a bump in the number of kindergartners, and of course, that's the first year of full-day kindergarten. That number declined, and again, it just depends on how many residents have students that would be registering for our kindergarten. But you'll see that there's a shift as those students continue on to first grade, and other students may join us in first grade, that there is an increase. Another interesting point that we see is around 4th, 5th grade, we start to see a decline, and that starts to then trickle into the other grades. We see a lot of students starting to leave the district for whatever reason in 7th and 8th grades. So it was interesting to be able to put this together to see what exactly that is, if they're choosing for their children to go to a different school and for whatever that reason may be. That's a point that we're interested in probing a little bit more with the community to see why that may be the case. When it comes in terms of staffing, the shift for staffing occurs with our enrollment. So in our elementary school, our primary grades, grades 1, kindergarten, and first grade, it's a smaller class size than 4th and 5th grade. So our staff will follow the students as they need to. And sometimes that does mean that teachers are reassigned to different buildings, different grade levels. Our elementary teachers can teach even in the middle school. They can teach 6th grade. What we've been able to do with some of the shift in enrollment is to take a look at some of the program improvements that we've made, particularly with the middle and high school schedule changes, and been able to reassign some staff to different positions within the district to be able to essentially fund from within these programmatic changes without adding a lot of additional staff. It doesn't mean that we haven't added any, but without adding a lot. And that was much of how we were able to also move to the full-day kindergarten program. One thing that I would like to point out, too, that when we look at the numbers, if for anybody that would look very carefully at all of the numbers as I look at you over right there, that these figures here do not include the self-contained special education classrooms that we have in the elementary school. So they're not included in there because those students are assigned to that teacher as their homeroom teacher and pretty much do spend the entire day with them. And we have, anywhere from about 20 to 30 students that may be in such a classroom in the elementary schools. Are there any questions?
Mr. Adams.
So what's interesting is, in one sense, it kind of, not that I'm a demographic specialist, but it kind of fits the trend nationally. I mean, baby boomers, kids, whatever they're designated as, baby boomers ended in 61, so their kids started to graduate high school in, 2010,
1997.
14. So, they started to basically end just as this started to go down, right? So that would make sense. But then you thought maybe we'd offset that by the number of new buildings that we had in the area and our full-day kindergarten. So it's a little bit curious. This seems to match what you would think demographically, but then since the new building came around, you think we'd offset that a little bit. So it's just a little bit interesting. But
So we're running a report to see with the new neighborhoods that have gone in, with the properties that have been sold, those catchment zones and how many new registrants we've had and how many students are coming in there. And I can provide the board with that information to see exactly how many new students, given those new residences that have been put up and are now occupied.
it'd also be interesting to see, and I'm sure we know this, but what our I always get asked, what's our per student cost? Especially now that we've added laptops to our students. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I hope it's a good number because, we're something to be proud of that we're providing laptops to our students now. So
I would defer to Mr. Burdnick for that exact figure.
Right.
There is a difference between a special education student and a regular education student, but the cost to educate the student is divided by all of the costs
Yeah, so I mean,
that go
that's-
in.
I always tell them
from-
it's a tricky number, and I don't want to misstate it, so.
Dr. Bowen and Mr. Miller.
If I could, the demographic change and conversation is part of a national conversation, and the data that Dr. Polinchak is showing you is in alignment with the report that we generated with Decision Insight a few years ago prior to the middle school projects, right? So we did have this projections occur. The fact of the matter is in 2008, there was a national, even global experience. And as a result of that, people really slowed down on having babies. The universities are projecting a massive shortfall of students around 2024, 2025. Massive shortage. You are going to see an incredible constriction at the university levels when that hits. Now, the good news is everything's a cycle, and people are again starting to have babies, and numbers will start going up. Not anytime soon. And despite our new construction, we have looked at this, and as Dr. Polinchak has said, and Mr. Burdnick will say shortly, people are having smaller families, and they're moving here without children and buying these really nice properties and paying the taxes, and that's a fantastic thing. So that's the wisdom of this board of closing schools and selling the properties and building properties that are going to contribute to the tax base while not producing a lot of children is just, remarkably foresighted. And so that's a pretty good scenario. I can say that the laptops, the Chromebooks, was a massive, mostly a repurposing of existing funds. There's some new monies involved, but it's not a huge cost driver, right, to the education. And from an equity perspective, when I got here, we were running a Bring Your Own Device program, which is by its nature inherently inequitable. So, poor families don't have access to the devices, don't have access to the internet. We've solved that problem. So we as a board took some really progressive steps, and we did it without trumpets and fanfare like other districts. We just did it because this is what 21st century education looks like. So, Mr. Burden?
Like I said, something to be proud of.
We're right around 21,000 per student now that's an average daily membership, which is not precisely the same as enrollment, but that gives, you want to use the per ADM so you can do comparables across school districts.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, this is very helpful information and very insightful, and I wouldn't want you to do a lot of work to it, but do you or Dr. Best have any insight as to what our enrollment numbers, particularly in 11th and 12th grade, were between the beginning of the year in September and the end of the year in June? In other words, how much of that drop-off occurred during the school year rather than over the summer?
So all the numbers compared here are October 1st, but we do lose students in our senior year in particular for just dropout rates, essentially. I mean, there are those. I would say we probably about 20 or 30 students. I don't think we're... Right. So, I mean, it depends on the year, but, throughout the year, certainly we do have students that, just may leave for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Polinchak.
Okay. And the final presentation that we have this evening is, manufacturing labs and instructional spaces. So what we wanted to present to the board is something that is a follow-up to a discussion we had about 2 months prior when we were talking about our middle school technology education classrooms and what those spaces would look like and the equipment and the types of programs that the students would have. And we've been doing some additional work to take a look at what could be the best experience that we could provide to our students to get them interested in the STEM fields, but also prepared for some of the different opportunities in industry that exist that are seriously in need of people coming out with the appropriate skills. Now, of course, that's not going to necessarily be satisfied through a comprehensive high school. Those may be students moving on to tech schools, but you've seen the reports. There's a lot of concern about having people that are skilled electricians, skilled carpenters in some of those different areas. And we want to make sure kids are getting exposed to see that this may be a pathway for them. College may not be the answer for them, but they can make a very healthy living coming right out of what would be high school, making a pretty good salary. So we want to make sure that they have that exposure. We're also looking at the physical spaces that we have in terms of the tech lab and some of the other spaces that exist in the middle school. So we want to have functional maker spaces where students can use design thinking, and of course we have the design thinking graphic up here, which is a process of students moving through generating and looking at a problem, generating an idea, formulating a plan and a prototype through that design process in order to create a solution of some sort. And that may be a product or it may be something else, but it's a way of thinking that is important for them, and it's a portable skill that they can use in all aspects of their lives. We also want to revolutionize the technology program to include more design labs, manufacturing spaces, robotics, and engineering. And, certainly while kids they may be all working on the same project to learn the tools and the process, we also want them to be able to have some autonomy and individualization and personalization where they can develop their own products, let's say, using all of this equipment. Also looking at physical education is another area because that's something that is important, and we really want to do physical education seriously. We're really concerned with kids, understanding what a healthy lifestyle means, the importance of their nutrition, the importance of exercise, importance of sleep, and also importance of just taking care of their more, mental faculties, finding good ways to relax, cope, deal with stress that aren't problematic later on because they can create other issues for them. So those are all pieces that we're really looking at. Here's just a couple of quick pictures of some different ideas we have for design. So, yoga, is one of these things. We certainly have mindfulness as a rotation in our elementary program right now out of the 6-day program. They have health and physical education, not paired together, but two separate classes of that. And students are going to have direct instruction in how to be more mindful and be more centered as individuals. And really with physical education, we really want them to be physically active. And if they're going to put on their sneakers and their gym clothes, we really want them to be doing something that isn't just a sport they have to, let's say, play on a team or with other people, but it's stuff that they can do individually and things they can do the rest of their lives as well. It's not just limited to while they're in middle school and high school. That really brings us to looking at an authentic STEM in action course. And here there's a video, which certainly if you're interested, you can click on that as you all have access to that, and the public has access to it as well. It's about 9 minutes long, so we're going to skip over that. And you can watch it whenever you want. But it really talks about the importance of students having this experience, not just so that they learn those technical skills, but it's a way of thinking. It's training the brain, and that is something that they can certainly apply in all other aspects of their lives. So we're looking at a STEM program that includes these 4 pillars. Where kids understand robotics, and it's not just to build the robots, but it's the problem solving and the coding and the development. Again, portable skill. Manufacturing, understanding what that process entails, not just making something and producing it, but how do you do it in a mass way? And understanding something about costs and price points and all of the logistics that go into that. Product creation, how do students take an idea and actually bring it to life into a physical product? And coding and design also being separate there, as that's another area where, again, it's not just about teaching kids to be computer programmers, it's teaching them logic And that's really important because, again, a portable skill. And impact of the entire program, we would have a program that would touch upon all of these different aspects, and then over time students would be able to personalize into the areas that they're more interested in. Middle school, we can offer students some opportunity for self-selection, but it really needs to be an overview because kids don't know what they like yet. They may think they like something and learn that they don't particularly like it or that they don't have an aptitude in it. That's the time to have that self-discovery. And to do this in middle school is good because it helps them, when they move on to the high school, think about what their pathway may be. It may be a pathway through the courses that are now offered and many more in a much more robust fashion now that we have more opportunity within our high school schedule. But it may even be MBIT, that may be the pathway that they choose to go towards, and that's perfectly fine. But they need to be thinking about that much earlier than the end of 8th grade. And that's important because it's a decision that will certainly have an impact on the rest of their educational career in high school. So here are just a couple of different examples of some of the products that we're looking to be able to bring into the program. And there's a lot of language here. Certainly you can look through it to see it's not, again, just the building of the robot, but the robots go through different challenges. So the kids have to construct it, but then they also have to operate it to solve certain problems. So it may be getting through a maze, it may be, picking up an object or something. And again, it's, if I hit a dead end, how do I back myself out to get back to the starting point to then take a different route? And all of those different steps that are involved in that process. This lunar CNC router, I can't talk very much about what this is. I don't know if Dr. Baugh, if you can chime in a little bit more. Some of this stuff, I was an English teacher, it starts getting a little bit beyond me. But if you could talk about that a little bit.
It's not a computer.
Yeah, it's not a computer router, but.
No, it's the next generation of routers. It's an intro to what's being used in industry. So when you have, for instance, a new planetarium manufactured, not that we're going to do that, ours is perfectly good and it's absolutely fantastic. It's all produced with these computer-driven routers for the levels of precision. This is an introduction to our students so that they can do that. So as kids are making things and designing things in a hands-on way, it's actually hands-on, hands-off, and using the technology to help drive that so that they can carry these conversations not only in job interviews, but when they're actually out on a shop floor. But the CNC router is sort of an industry gateway to manufacturing. And, as the board knows, we had a bunch of students presenting at a manufacturing conference a week ago this past Friday over at the Fuge. And, that was the talk at the manufacturing conference. Centennial needs it quickly. And I'm not an English major, so I'm struggling with the C.
Computer numerical control. I think if I could get you coaching the robotics team, we'd be set. Come on.
Okay. So this is the Airwolf printer, and this is, again, the next generation of where we're going with our 3D printers. Keeping in mind that a lot of this equipment, there's the equipment you purchase, but there's also some supply, some consumable supply that would go into this as well. And part of what kids have to learn is you can't just put things together and just keep trying and just wasting that material. They need to go through a process to make sure before they're actually using this equipment and creating these different prototypes that they're pretty certain it's going to be what they intend it to be. And that's really where the teacher comes in as the guide and the coach to help the students move through that process. Trial and error is important, but waste is something we want to be careful about. Prosthetic Kids Hand Challenge. This is an actual program that's going on in a school district that we'll be visiting sometime this month or early next month, where students are actually developing prosthetic hands. And they do that for children that have, for whatever reason, lost a limb. And this is really, again, a real-life application for students to see It's not just about building neat little widgets or toys or things to play with. This is really something that can change somebody's life, and that's the direction. So for the kids that have the calling to service as well as, passion for technology creation and, in collaborative work, this is something that, we hope that they would get excited with. Heat press vinyl graphite plotter, and this is, again, can be used to make posters and all kinds of other magnets, accoutrements that we have within the school. We do purchase these things from vendors, and it would be really neat if kids can make those things, and then they become the posters that we're hanging around the schools, as opposed to having them be things we have to purchase from a vendor. So they'll have some ownership over that. So here's a sense of the pricing that would go into the initial cost of purchasing these materials. This would be something that we're looking to do in place of what formerly was approved by the board 2 months ago with the maker space that we have. It has a little bit more dynamic kind of programming attached to it, so it's not just designing one particular product, although those materials could also be repurposed. But we're really trying to hit on each of those 4 pillars so that students have that representative experience to see really what's of interest to them, where's their aptitude, and what would they want to continue on in a more deeper fashion as they're moving through their high school experience. And just a fun graphic to end on. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Pellegrino.
This is so cool. Like, this is what I was really hoping that you guys were going to come up with. And so can I just clarify, this is, if a kid wants to take the STEM Expo in middle school, this is what they're doing? Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Dixon?
I had not so much a question, but just a thought about the prosthetic hand. It's amazing that that's something that could be done. And, when I was a freshman in college, I was an engineering student. And I wasn't much of an engineering student, but I took ES 101. And the remarkable thing that we actually did in that class and what it was built around was, and this was a college level class, and I'm looking at something like, this is not very different from what we were assigned to as college students. I went to college in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is also where the Crayola factory happens to be. And there is also, as there are everywhere, we were working with a home for people with severe, developmental disabilities and things. And the idea of the ES 101 class that they had set up was that we were broken up into, our class was groups of however many, and we were designing simple machines that could be used by people who really had maybe limited use of one hand to do useful work, and Crayola partnered with it. So that, for example, the team I was on, we designed a machine. Crayola's, markers that they would ship to stores have hang tabs. And I guess for certain applications, boxing them up for certain things, they wanted to be able to remove those hang tabs to save room in the packaging. So we designed a machine that somebody with one hand could load the box of markers into it, run a slicer like that, and then move on to the next one and so forth. And obviously, there was a bit of a charitable concept here because there were probably more efficient ways for Crayola to go about that. But the point was we partnered with a major company to do something for people who, give them an opportunity to actually perform work for which they could be paid. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, if that, since that prosthetic hand, I got to think you're partnering. You're not just going to design hands and then hope that somebody wants to buy them, right?
It's actually attached to a project for that reason. And I think overall, partnerships, expanding that to local companies or different firms, once we have the equipment, we can partner with them because we can say it's not just that we're looking for funding from you, we're looking for the expertise. We want the kids to be able to talk to the people that do this as a job every day and understand what that means. The exposure they have to adults working in any industry is invaluable. It helps them develop their communication skills, which is really important for them, and it can give them an edge certainly when they're going out to look for their own jobs. And it helps them make some informed decisions. If we have this equipment, it's easy to bring partners in to say, you know, we're set up for this. What we need is your expertise.
Right.
And you know, of course, always support to keep this ongoing and you know, keep the funding, you know, as we need to replace things, or even, you know, this technology changes all the time.
Sure.
You know, we're never going to be state of the art, but we're going to be as close as we can get to that within our financial parameters. But to be able to have something like that would be fantastic.
This is really tremendous, and credit to Ms. Pellegrino for kind of pushing in this direction, because I think this came out as really, really tremendous.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Polachuk, this is very thorough, and I'm pleased that we're looking into this. Pricing-wise, you know, when Mr. Schaefer first wanted us to get a 3D printer, I think we would have had to pay more than that, this whole package for just the 3D printer. But as I'm looking at this and as this moves forward, I'd like to get, you know, because of the number of things that can be done in these fields, and, you know, I think it's great that we can produce a prosthetic limb, and I think probably around the country now there are more prosthetic limbs being produced than will actually be used, but it's important for kids to know that they can do that. Looking at the price breakdowns, I only see the robotics calls out the fact that this can be used in year after year. As this moves forward, I'd like to get some input as to the extended usage of this hardware in other projects that the district gets into, both horizontally, meaning in other areas, and vertically in future years.
Right. And that's something that there's two ways for us that we're looking at it to approach it. First, it's a collaborative approach. So we're developing a team of teachers that are cross-disciplinary. So it's not enough for just our tech ed teachers to be involved in this. We need to talk with our FCS teachers. We need to talk with our art teachers. We need to talk with all of the specials teachers, because they'll have insight into where we can see the utility of the equipment and the products across horizontally, as you said, in other areas. The other is looking at when we're building our budget moving forward, that this becomes part of the budget and our operating costs for the district as we forecast, as we do with all other areas. We budget and forecast when we need to replace buses. We'll need to do the same thing with this equipment, because we need to make sure that we have working equipment for students, but we also have to make sure that if there is better technology that comes out, that we're sure to make sure that they have access to that. So that's something that the Office of Learning and Innovation is working closely with Mr. Burdnick to make sure that the plan for that department or that office or that department certainly mirrors what we are currently doing with facilities, so that it's transparent and the board would know where those costs would be coming up.
Great, thank you. Mr. Code-Dixon?
Yeah, this is all very exciting, but a couple of pieces here. It's great to have all these collaborations for the teachers, but what can we do to reach out to the business world, to labor and industry, to bring funding into the school district, you know, as a support piece, and also bring expertise in, you know, from that industry.
Well, and I know that the Bucks County IU just put something out today for a partnership with PA. I forget the exact title of it, but with labor and industry to talk with those partners. And it's also to be able to collaborate with other districts as to what they're doing and how they're also approaching and reaching out to those different businesses. Part of that work has to be really something the administration takes on along with the teachers who would be working directly with those partners to be able to set that up. And we have a rich history here of partnerships with Fox Chase Cancer Center and University of Pennsylvania, the Franklin Institute, and even going back into some other areas where we have students that are in our work experience program. We've developed pretty good relationships with them as well. So we need to take that model and replicate that. And some of it's reaching out and initiating that contact, door knocking, and asking them, hey, just come in and see what we have, And, it's, again, not always asking for funding, although that would be nice. It's the expertise, because at the end of the day, our teachers are teachers. They're not the people doing this day in, day out as their profession, and they'll grow and learn, which will give our students a much richer experience as well.
And if I may, we're in the process of forging those relationships now. I mentioned this manufacturing conference. I took the liberty of skipping the Bucks IU superintendent's meeting and spending the day shaking hands and making connections. And we have a number of next steps with a number of local manufacturers. This sort of thing relies, and as Dr. Polenshock said, this district has a rich history of partnerships, and it's a matter of walking in and shaking hands and inviting folks in to talk with us. And we are in the process of doing that, and we're trying to develop those relationships. For those of you on the Bucks MBIT, you know that there is almost no one doing any kind of manufacturing anywhere anymore. Much to my dismay, and much to the dismay of numerous employers in the region. They have a huge graying out of the workforce, and there are phenomenal middle-class jobs just going unfilled at the moment. And they have to be able to drive CNC routers, or they have to have appropriate certificates. But there are fantastic jobs available to high school graduates. And so they can roll out of high school with skill sets that we're going to start introducing them to that they can't get anywhere else. So, and while
Come on,
Bucks
Mr.
County
Schaefer.
IU is...
You know
is-
you want to volunteer your time and do this, right? You could be like Mr. Hand. You could change the life of a Spicoli somewhere.
We're going to keep asking, Mr. Schaefer, just so you know. Yeah, but the skills you have are the ones we need. Your country needs you, sir.
I was sure you were going to mention the T-shirt project with that vinyl cutter and heat press.
Well, and the interesting thing is because of the support of innovation in the district, we have more and more teachers stepping up, asking to drive innovative projects. There's Mrs. Slip at the high school is launching in the same way. We have the ski manufacturing club. She's launching a T-shirt manufacturing club. Mr. Quintangeli was starting that over at Klinger before he left. A number of other teachers are starting to bring forward really rich, intriguing proposals. And in many respects, Centennial is becoming a hub of innovation because of the support you folks are providing to the teachers so that they can pursue this. But I can guarantee you that by leaning into the manufacturing marketplace and sectors, we're going to be forging strong partnerships over the next few years, which will help us extend learning opportunities for kids, which is what all of these presentations have been showing tonight. We're increasing opportunities for kids.
Mr. Goddickson, I didn't mention it at the beginning because it wasn't part of the paid tour, but Hershey made sure that I didn't leave before I got to see their 3D chocolate printer.
My question,
So I didn't taste it.
my question might be, I'm no expert in this, so I'm just kind of curious because of what we're talking about putting together here. I'm wondering to what extent, this could become something, if we're looking both for funding and just for symbiosis in general, with a partnership with MBIT. Because MBIT, it seems to me there's going to be a lot of commonality and purpose here, between having a makerspace available within the Centennial School District geared in certain ways and to the general mission of MBIT. So I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, I'd like to address that for MBIT's purpose, and I know Mr. Kleinschmidt will agree. This is kind of like the culinary arts program. MBIT has a full scope program for people who want to make a career out of that. But we also have culinary arts in the high school for people who aren't going to make a career out of it, but would like to know how to be involved and how to do it. And the same thing would apply here. if it's a manufacturing course and MBIT teaches it, it's going to be for students who will be making this their career. This is kind of like, you know, our drama club, for kids who want to be involved in drama but aren't going to become actors in their career.
It's got to be a little bit more than that, though, right? Because you're using this as a vehicle to actually teach STEM.
It's real stuff.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. But, like, I was in drama, so no offense to drama, but drama was purely an after-school thing that you did on a completely elective basis, right? Yes.
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of things. First, kids will learn about how to move through this design thinking process in order to create some sort of products that solve a problem. It's that thinking that's really important, whether or not they ever do anything with their hands or use this equipment. It's about training the brain to think in that process, because that's something they would use if they went into any other career or, you know, just in life. You would hope that they're doing that. By having this in middle school, it also helps some students make that decision about whether or not I really fell in love with this and now I want to go to MBIT, and maybe that wasn't something that was on my radar.
Right.
But I really found that this is something that's interesting to me. I have an aptitude. I want to pursue that. Some kids know early on what they want to do. Some kids sometimes think they know what they want to do, but they don't really understand what it is until they put their hands on it. So, you know, before parents spend a lot of money on college or even technical school post high school, you know, we want to make sure that they're making good informed decisions about what it is that they want to do with the rest of their lives, and what skills and discipline it takes to be successful in that profession.
And then not to belabor a point here, because I guess what I'm interested in is that, and I don't want to denigrate other after-school clubs, but this seems to me to have the potential to be something more than just another club that people do. You know, obviously we have a football team. As much as I love our football team, most of them are not going to that's not going to be their career playing in the NFL, that kind of thing. But this just and where I'm coming from, and this is personal experience, but, you know, when I was in high school, I already mentioned I was an engineer, thought I was going to be an engineer. And when I got to engineering school, because I did not, and, you know, people who are going to college aren't routed through MBIT, right? I get to engineering school and I actually get introduced into a lab space, or, you know, in a place where, and I mean like a shop. Mm-hmm. My father had no aptitude in that area, didn't teach me anything. And so I could maybe sit in a classroom and solve equations, and that was fine. But when you were actually put in a practical situation in a shop, I didn't know anything about how to do anything. Mm-hmm. And I see this as like, you know, some pathway, you know, it's a little bit more than just a club, right? In the sense that it becomes a pathway because engineering is a much more likely career for somebody than, say, you know, playing in the National Football League. This becomes a path that, you know, I'm seeing this as, that's what I mean. Like, I'm seeing this as a place where, because I don't know how well integrated even now the idea of going to technical school and then to college is. I'd like to see it more integrated that way for the purposes I'm talking about, but, you know, there's different things that need to be triangulated.
We can think of this as a gift that we're giving back to the parents for allowing us to educate their children, that we are helping their children make good decisions based on information and experience before they get to a place where they commit to a college or they commit to a career pathway, expend a lot of money and realize that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and it's maybe not something that's going to make them happy. What better thing could we help parents with in terms of their investment and also helping to guide their children?
And just as a quick sidebar, a significant number in the 80 percentile or higher of graduates from MBIT go on to higher education, whether it's a specialized school, 2-year college, or a 4-year college. It's a significant percentage to go on. Ms. Pellegrino, you had... Okay. Okay, thank you. And before, Mr. Schaefer.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome aboard. Thank you for volunteering.
All right, I'll put it back up here. But okay.
Yeah, name, address.
That's a
3
tough
minutes,
act to
sir.
follow. I'll admit I'm confused. Is this a elective course, a regular course, or after-school activity?
It's an elective course.
In 6th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade?
It's an elective course for 7th and 8th grade students.
Okay. One thing, no offense, in all this salesmanship, there's a big box here on the evolution of a product. The word is, in my humble opinion, design. In other words, the concept, which I call concept formulation, that's the idea. And you have an idea to solve a problem, I have an idea to solve the same problem. We pursue, your team pursues your idea, my team pursues my idea. Come the time we want to actually make, i.e. a prototype, your team, my team, someone, that's the engineer or in my day we called them draftsmen or designers. We have to put that idea on, and today it's a computer, in my day it was paper, but we have to put that idea in the design of the thing, assuming it's a product, such that once it's designed, now it goes into a model shop, not a manufacturing facility, but a true model shop to take design that you guys, your team put forward, design that my team put forward, in a hard-nosed math, in this today and age, a computerized design of the piece parts, all the wiring, whatever components, elements needed to make the end product. That's the big deal. Someone then puts it all together. Technician, engineers, take the products that were fabricated according to the engineering model in the computer, your team, my team. Then now we have the prototype. Now we got to test, and one thing that wasn't mentioned, evaluate. It's one thing to test, but you got to evaluate. So you have to have requirements, specifications. My team met half the specs and half the requirements. Your team met all the specs and all the requirements. Decision is to go forward with your team's design. Mine, sorry, unless you got a lot of money and want to I'd be a backup to your team or your design. So that whole process is, in me, that's developmental engineering. So then you get your product prototyped, then you go to the money makers or your bosses, and show your product. And of course, if it's a company that's in business, I work for the federal government, it's a little different, but you got to convince the money lenders to go forward with what we call either limited production or next step to prototype. In other words, make about 50 of them. Just grab that number. And then, after you get approval for that with money, now the problem is take that prototype, fine-tune it, because you found out some shortcomings in the test and evaluation phase. So you incorporate them, build another model. Hey, that works fine. No, we have one little glitch. Improve that. Now you got iteration number 6. That's the one. Then you're going to make 25 of them. Those 25 go through a test program, a test and evaluation program based on specifications and requirements. In other words, your goal is to have this product do certain things in certain environments, blah, blah, blah. If you meet that hurdle, then you come back to management and said, hey, we have a design that meets all the customer's requirements. It's within budget, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody decides, assuming you got a customer that's willing to go forward, to manufacture it. That's another ballgame, because now you have an R&D design proven. That doesn't mean it can be produced at a fair cost and a decent rate. I mean, it could be jewelry. That's one thing, a watch.
His
But-
presentation was longer than yours.
But anyway, I just want to, so it's a middle school program, and my last comment, if I could make the last comment, I would hope that the teacher, i.e., and students know and be told what the CNC router is, how it works, and what it does and what it can't do. The 3D printer, just don't plug it in and play around and make something.
Mr.
What's in the
Schaefer, I
printer,
apologize.
how it
I'm gonna
works,
have to stop
and
you.
everything. Thank
All
you very
fairness to
much.
the policy. Thank you, sir. Okay, and Ms. Pellegrino?
I just did want to respond to Mr. Schaefer. I think that what you just went through was the entire design thinking process. And what I think this program is going to do is do what you want to do, but for middle schoolers. And I think a really cool thing that the middle school kids could do that isn't necessarily like, they're not going to have time in the school year to do 6 iterations of a product. But what they might be able to do is come up with a concept and then pitch it to investors, real life investors that either the teacher comes up with or we find as the administration finds, and then they come in and decide to invest. So I do think like parts of what you said could happen. I really do. And I think that's possible within the course that they designed just for 7th and 8th graders. Maybe not, a legit engineering company, but
Okay, thank you. I think that has it for this segment. Dr. Pollock asked to speak before we got into the next segment.
Thank you. Dr. Ball and Dr. Pollinchuk, I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you would, not on this, I should have probably done it after the Khan Academy presentation, but maybe you could put these down and bring it back to the Education Committee sometime in the future, okay? Can you let us know what are the district's common formative assessments? Are these assessments in line with the PSSAs and the MAP testing the district has started? And also, how are these correlating with student grades? Are students getting A's in these, in their classroom, and then really doing poorly in the PSSAs? How's their correlation between the two? I would like to know some of that, and I think some of the other board members might like to know that too. But since I didn't ask this before, I'm not going to have you necessarily answer it tonight, but if you could, put it down as something for us to look at and discuss in the future.
Yeah, this is certainly, as we shared with the board, we're doing presentations 4 times a year, so we can certainly have something ready for the board by the 3rd and more than likely the 4th presentation to show how we're triangulating all of that data and what we're doing with those students that maybe have some anomalies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pollinchuk. Next up, going into Section 4, Education and Pupil Services, is Dr. Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Kleinschmidt and Dr. Pollinchuk for pulling that up. Basically, it's that time of year where we're starting to think about inclement weather. One of the things we have added to our toolkit for this year is the 3-hour delay. Everyone is familiar with school cancellations. Everyone is familiar with the 2-hour delay. One of the things that we ran into last year was if we'd have had a 3-hour delay, we'd have been able to have school, partly with our fairly mild winters for the most part. If we have just a little bit more time, we can get our facilities cleaned and ready to go. The sun often comes out and we're able to heat things up enough, and if we can call a 3-hour delay, then we can get school open. And in Pennsylvania, as long as we get the kids in, we get credit for the day. So early indicators are that this winter could be quite tough. One of our goals is to have graduation when we'd like to have graduation. And to that end, we think, in looking at last year, if we'd had a 3-hour delay as part of our tools, we would have been able to open at least 2 and maybe 3, possibly 4 days last year. It was that close. But when you're calling it at 4:45 in the morning, because our bus drivers are hitting the road to get to the buses to get the fleet out, a 3-hour delay would buy us some time and some comfort. We'll be sharing this with the entire Centennial community. We've had our principals and assistant principals look at it. We've talked about it with the association a little bit. I had a parent come up to me last night who was teaching in one of the other C's, either CR or CB. I think CR is looking at going to a 3-hour delay. New Hope was flirting with it last year. So the 3-hour delay would still allow us to provide warm, dry schools as well as meals for our kids. As you know, 40% of our kids are below the free and reduced lunch level, and so this would allow us to ensure that they get at least 1 and possibly 2 meals, the second meal being sort of a breakfast grab and go type thing. So from meeting the needs of our students, this would be a huge asset. So while this doesn't require board action, I want the board to be aware of it, as we will be sharing this with our community tomorrow or Thursday.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ball. And I just wanted to add, this doesn't just impact our people who are out cleaning parking lots and driving buses. There's another important member of our community, which is our less experienced drivers who may be trying to drive to high school, and that extra hour of clearing is going to be beneficial and safer for them.
Any other questions on that one? Okay, International Baccalaureate Committee, Ms. Pellegrino.
Well, I think last meeting that we had, I said everything that I needed to say, but just to reiterate, we had our first meeting. There were teachers there. Dr. Best was there. Dr. Polinchak sat in for a bit of it. Students were also present, and we gave basically what is the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program that's meant for high schools. What are the components of it? How does it work? And then there was an opportunity to ask questions. I fielded those questions as best that I could. And then I believe that we'll be having a meeting. I think the committee is going to be coming to Downingtown, where I work, to meet with our administration. And they're going to have an opportunity to ask more logistical questions that a principal would know how to answer that better than the Spanish teacher would. And then we're also going to meet with a panel of students. I listened very carefully to some of the concerns that were raised at our initial meeting. And what I'm hoping to do is find kids that sort of fit the description of the student that we were speaking about, so that they can provide their experience, their honest experience in the program. And that will give parents and teachers a perspective that maybe they didn't have before. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know that we have a specific day set up, but maybe early December, late November.
Yeah, we're had a number of conflicts with the original 2 proposed dates, and we are continuing to look for a date that's mutually agreeable with your school and with your team. So,
Thank you very much for the update.
So you don't have a date for this next meeting, but you will.
Yeah.
Are there any other board members on your committee?
Mr. Godikson expressed interest, Mrs. Brancato, Mr. Miller. So I think that's the
Okay.
4.
Just be aware that that's the maximum number of board members you can have, because if you have 5, you have to advertise it,
Right.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving right along. Thank you very much, Dr. Polinchak. Going up to the items to be approved under education, items 4.2A through D. Does anybody want any one of those items pulled? Okay, hearing no objections to any of the items, Be it, what's that? Oh, thank you. Oh, it's on. Hey,
You gotta speak into it.
It is on. Yeah.
You gotta speak into
I am soft-spoken, I understand. Yeah, that's me. Okay, be it resolved that the Centennial School District Board of School Directors, 4.2A, which is a change, approves the revised agreement with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit for the allocation of Title IIA services in the amount of $29,755. 4.2B, which is a new item, approves the contract with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit for Title I services to non-public schools in the amount of $5,246. 4.2C, new item, approves the memorandum of understanding with the Fuge LLC, no cost to the district. And 4.2D, another new item, approves retroactively the purchase of science kits for elementary schools from Delta Education, district cost not to exceed $31,950.91.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I have to abstain from A and B due to
Okay.
employment, but otherwise approved.
Okay, thank you. So, for items, with the exception of A and B, it's 8, nothing, and then it would be 7-0-1 for these other two items. Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Pollock, is Mr. Golan-Dixon going to pick up the finance side for Mr. Shafter, or?
No, Mr. Goddison does.
Oh, okay.
And these are all really, items for presentation, so Mr. Burtnick has already raised himself to the podium. I'm going to let you take over.
So I don't want to worry anyone. I'm just here because there's one slide that's kind of important to frame the entire discussion. Let me just run through the list. And item 51A, we like to talk in multi-year plans. We executed year one of a copy and multi-function refresh strategy in 2017-18. We went from pretty good copier fleet and a central copy center and a lot of decentralized printers in classrooms. And we started pulling back those decentralized printers, putting multi-function devices in hallways. We saved $44,000 that first year. That's all in. That's paper, that's cartridges, that's per click. So we would expect that to continue. But it gets even better than that. In terms of supporting the educational mission of the school district, comparing September to September, the copy center was 17.5% more productive in terms of clicks in September of 18 than it was in September of 17. And those multi-function devices that teachers could access often right outside their classroom, 10% more productive in September. So our folks are printing and moving instruction along. Item 51B, or just your monthly reports, PSIF is your primary depository. Obviously, our fixed income investments are earning more than 2% at this point. Item 51C, 2019-20 Act 1 index is 2.3%. That's official from PDE. Item 51D is the projected 12-year multi-year bus refresh schedule. That's the first draft. You have to read it this way. You have to replace about 5 to 6 of these vehicles a year, every year, to smooth your cost out. So, and that's so we'll take one more look at that and get bids ready to go on the street before December. Item 51E, the district participates in demand response. The demand response is during peak load days. Usually they're very, very high heat days. In late afternoons, we often are called upon to reduce our load. That saves you money, both on your future electric bills, because it reduces your capacity charges, but it also gives you some additional revenue. We met all of our targets on the last report. Item 51F is an updated 5-year capital reserve fund projection. The simple way to read it is we need to add about $600,000 a year, even just from the general fund, even just to have a pretty lean program. Take note that just like we did some engineering studies at the middle schools in 2014, I would advise you that about 2 years from now it would be prudent to go back and do some engineering to look at Take, for instance, the high school, those Florida heat source pumps that run your heating and cooling systems at the high school, they're going to be 10 years old. So that's starting to approach end of life cycle. So we're going to have to start planning for some of the replacement of those activities. 51G, you have a 5-year general fund revenue projection. I'll give a little more detail of that down below. The short story is a little bit of growth local. It doesn't have any Act 1 increases yet baked in. It presumes that we're going to do well in real estate tax appeals. That sometimes takes fighting to the next level. And fairly unspectacular state increases in flat federal. You have the 2019-20 budget development instructions that were provided our administrators. We've kicked off those processes. And here's the, I'm going to skip over 51I for a second, and we'll do that last. 51J, 2 years ago, we shrunk the size of the business office. The board asked me to come back and report back on how that was turning out. Hey, we're in the middle of Skyward implementation. It's an exciting time, and frankly, given the state of our budget, we couldn't afford to change anything if we wanted to. Item 51K is an e-commerce update. I just want you to understand not all of Skyward is gloom and doom. We have some pretty cool functionality where, I'm looking at Ms. Robold, you can, for some small dollar orders, you can go right in through the requisition system to order through Amazon, through the U.S. Communities contract, which that's pretty cool functionality. And for those of you that are teachers, you can do the same thing for school specialty. So you know how awesome that would be to be, and it's literally like you go in through the requisition system, so it gets budget checked and it goes through all the workflow approvals, but you're actually punching out, so you're getting the entire shopping cart at the cooperative purchasing rates. Item 51L, you see our neighbors in Warminster Township are moving toward third-party delinquent real estate tax collection. I provided some data last month, or some information last month. I'm providing additional information this month. There is no action item in front of you. We're obviously, Dr. Ball and I are monitoring that, and I think we'll see what the feedback is on what Warminster's doing, and probably have to come back to you with a recommendation next month. What you have would be essentially the 3 actions that you would have to take if you wanted to follow suit. One would be to move to the Municipal Claims Act, the other would be to hire a third-party tax collector, and the other would be to direct those taxes not to be collected by the Tax Claim Bureau. The best way to think about it is you would recapture 5% that the Tax Claim Bureau takes off the top now. The item 51M, in terms of supporting the 5-year forecast on federal revenues, you see the latest Congressional Budget Office economic analysis. It's noteworthy. They hint that we'll have some downturn in growth, going to 1.6 to 1.7% growth predicted from 2020 to 2028. Part of that is driven by a gap between revenues and expenditures at a federal level, and also general aging of the population. 51N is really specific to an aging of the population. Looks the Independent Fiscal Office, which is a Commonwealth independent agency. You see the impact of aging on available resources on the state budget. So we think that those are two pretty lean. And I just wanted to connect just one slide. Very early on this evening, you heard about some of the return on investment, and I just want to tie that back to how that played out with the budget and how this board made decisions and allocations. So in 2015-16, that's 2 years ago compared to 17-18, our actual cost went up $9.1 million, and you can slice that 2 different ways. If you want to look at the thing that you bought, there was an increase in the cost of professional staff, part of that driven by contract, part of that driven by full-day kindergarten. You had an increase in retirement contributions, and that impacted us across a bunch of functional areas. We had an increase in tuition. Part of that is on charter schools. Thank you, PDE. Part of that was we had additional special education needs. And then finally, we went 1-to-1. So we had a change in our equipment costs. However, if you slice the data on a functional basis, and you take the cost of regular education and special education, MBIT, and direct pupil services like your behavioral analysts, your counselors, your curriculum service, and all down to 2,800, which is technology. you can see that those costs increased $10.4 million, and everything else in the budget decreased by 1.4 over 2 years. So we made a significant effort to invest in program over the last 2 years. It's a significant shift in our budget priorities. So I just wanted to call the board's attention to that. Keep in mind, as you look at the 2,800, 15-16 was probably a year that the district frankly didn't invest enough money in technology, so the real additional cost of one-to-one would have been about $500,000 a year in equipment. But in terms of priorities, it all went immediately to the classroom or in the first ring around it. Thank you for indulging me on showing one slide. And then there's just one action item tonight. That's the annual item for the to mail the homestead exemption. We partner with BCIU.
Mr. Adams, do you have a question?
I have a comment about a couple of the
Okay.
information
Okay. Surely.
Okay. So on the buses, are we just, as we move forward, are they all going to be propane buses from now on?
For a long time, that's what we'll be buying.
Even the all size buses will all be?
Yeah, you'll get to a point where you're going to want to keep just a few diesels on hand for trips, where you need that longer mileage. But it's going to be a long time before we buy another diesel bus.
Okay. The taxes. So, we go through the projected Act 1 here. So, I mean, I just hope the public understands now as they read the paper and they see that the township is facing a 45% increase in taxes. That the prudent measures that this board's taken over the years with 2%, 3% yearly tax increases, so we didn't face a 45% tax increase. So anybody that would, attack a prudent board member for a reasonable 2 or 3% tax increase over every year not to face a crisis is not taking a prudent look at things, particularly when school boards cannot raise taxes like a township can. They cannot, they are capped. So this is the exact situation that we are trying to avoid every year when we prudently vote to try and ease into each year with a prudent tax increase. And the third thing is, Mr. Burdick, and I never feel bad about doing this, and I don't care how it sounds, but the money you save this district by little things, and this isn't just Mr. Burdick, I'm sorry, administration in general, with copy centers and bond refinances and administrative changes and equipment and programs, the changes that you can make at an administrative level is the things that can happen, the changes that can be made, and the money that can switch drastically by the people that you have there is incredible. And I think people should always realize it, and I will say it till I'm blue in the face at every board meeting. So, kudos to you guys for these changes that you make and the money that you save, because every $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 in bonds, I mean, that's significant. So thank you. All right, I'm done.
Mr. Miller?
I agree with Mr. Adams, but with regard to 51L, the delinquent taxes, I realize we're not there yet, but it suddenly dawned on me why Portnoy was trying to get me to visit their booth at the conference last week. Are we looking at any other providers, or I did not visit them, but
Honestly, right now, we're taking a look at what Warminster Township is
so
doing.
they're the driving force.
In another, in another jurisdiction, in another lifetime, I bid this out.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Are we talking at all with the county about these services as well, or are we just looking for the outside?
No, we're working with our Warminster tax collector, Bobby, is facilitating conversation with the Tax Claim Bureau.
Tax Bureau.
No, Bobby's facilitating conversation with the Tax Claim Bureau.
Okay. Dr. Pollack?
Thank you. My question was also pursuant to 5L. I'm just curious. I guess I mean I assume that you're going to hire if we are thinking about or possibly investigating at some point hiring a company to do a third party to do real estate tax collection for delinquents. We'd obviously have to pay that company. So the theory behind this is that they would be more efficient in getting such delinquent accounts paid, or how, it's how are we going to make up for the money we're paying to the company?
Actually, flip the paradigm around. The Municipal Claims Act puts the burden of delinquent tax collection financially on the delinquent taxpayer. So all the costs other than the initial $40 letter go toward are borne by the delinquent taxpayer, as opposed to the tax claim bureau that takes 5% off the top.
Can I ask then, just as a follow-up? I mean, I know, and I'm just curious. There are obviously penalties associated as it stands, right, with being late, and they
Yes.
increase as time goes on. What would a third-party private company do to those penalties?
So if you look at, let me scroll down to one of the items, if you, just for illustration, we use the same fee schedule that Warminster is looking at. You can see all the different steps in the process would become an add-on cost that the delinquent taxpayer would have to pay once they get beyond that initial letter. And they're in incremental steps. Under the tax claim law, it's pretty much a 4-year process to get to the end. Very few, very, very, very few sheriff sales ever happen in our boundaries, ever. I mean, you have to remember, we collect about $70 million a year in current taxes, and only about 1 million go delinquent. So, if that makes sense. So we're not a huge pot of delinquent taxes here.
But at the same time, these fees are significantly higher than what the county is charging
Yes,
to the homeowner.
yes.
Dr. Pollack?
Thank you. I was the one pushing for the propane buses for 7 years, as you know. Do we have any idea of our savings, besides the environmental factor? Do we have any idea of the savings in the propane buses, or is it too early to tell that?
So globally, it's a little early, but I'll answer it this way. So in our maintenance on the buses, on the propane, it's an oil change at 7,500 miles, but it's roughly seven units of motor oil as opposed to 19-ish on the diesel buses. And when you do the diesel, it's at 10,000 that we're doing the changes, but you're changing out other fluids and other filters, so it's a faster maintenance on the propane bus using less oil. So you're seeing it on the maintenance side, of you're decreasing your cost of the supplies you're using and the person power.
What about per mile or over the year of a bus or anything like that?
We need more data than what we
Okay.
have. And keep in mind that you've had bounces in the diesel and the diesel market that might sway that analysis a little bit to make propane a little better than it would be if you looked over a longer period of time.
But down the road, in a year, 2, 3, 4, whatever, could we get that type of thing so that we have some idea?
We definitely need, just even on the maintenance, we need a longer trajectory than the first oil change.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just curious, because research says that they're, again, better for the environment, cheaper to run, easier to maintain, longer lasting.
Yes.
So I just wondered if, we had a figure on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Do you have any comments on the next item, or do you want me to read it first?
This is an annual item, and it's for the mailing of the required homestead exemptions. The best package is to move with the other school districts through the intermediate unit. You see this item coming in front of you every year.
All right, any questions, I will read this item for approval. Be it resolved that the Centennial School District Board of School Directors approves the agreement with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit to coordinate the district's required homestead exclusion notices in December 2018. District cost not to exceed .0629 cents per parcel.
Second, and that's .69. Or
I said
629.
0.6.
It's 0. Yes.
0.629.
Yeah, well, that's what he said, 0.629 cents.
Do we have a second?
Mr.
Second.
Miller seconded it.
Oh, he
Yes.
did.
Any questions? Approval? Yes?
Aye.
Nays? And I will have to abstain for this. So 701.
Okey dokey.
Okay, Mr. Adams, operation.
Mrs. Brancato, do you have anything on the
We have
committee?
our first meeting tomorrow at 4:15.
Okey dokey. So then we'll move on to the items for approval. Does it?
How many members of the committee are?
Dr. Ball was going to talk to Dr. Best.
We're up to about 9 members. We have Ryan Mulford from the high school, Cynthia Bradney. We've got a couple of community members in the pipeline who are still tentative, and a number of other. Mr. Whartonby's on the committee. Mrs. Stone is on the committee. Mrs. Liebert was invited but could not make it. And so we're up to about 9 members on the committee.
And are there any other board members?
Tara. Yeah, Tara.
You're on the committee. That's it. When is the meeting?
Tomorrow at 4:15.
Tomorrow at 4:15. Okay. Any other board members want to be on the committee? Do you have any problem with any other board member being on the committee? We could have up to 4.
Well, there's already an awful lot of people on the committee. I think we already have 9 people.
Which isn't a lot.
Well, that's a lot of cooks in the soup.
Any other board members? Mr. Dixon?
Well, I'll defer to Mrs. Brancato's judgment on this.
Okay. I may want to be on the committee if I. Okay. Tomorrow at 4:15.
Yeah, it's short notice
But
for,
we can only have 4, remember.
I'm interested, but it's short notice for me. I'm not sure I can get there tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. We good? All right. So we have items presented for approval. Does anybody want to pull any of the 2 items? Any questions? Alrighty, I will read them. Oh, we do have a question. Go ahead.
So this is, hold on, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
This is for the approval to award the bid for the pools.
It's for the evaluation, yes.
So I did just want to ask a question. I was looking at the company. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. When we had the initial middle school pools meeting, we had a lot of people in here, and they were sharing their concerns. And I think that they were afraid that swimming was going away, and that was kind of the way that they were talking about this problem. But I think the biggest problem that really was that we want programs for the elementary school kids, and we want space for our clubs and our high schools, Archbishop Wood included, to practice. So I think if that's the problem that we're talking about, then the solution doesn't necessarily have to be to keep 2 middle school pools open. We might want to be more creative about it and look at what we already have. So, and I'm going to say my concern with this company, and I could be wrong, but what I would really like to see happen is that there is an expert on natatoriums specifically that comes and looks at what we have, comes and looks at what tenant has, and then helps us work through this problem, right? We want to be able to provide this. We can't with the current little pool that we have at tenant. So how do we, that's what people were saying, that the the Centennial Aquatics Club didn't have, they were monopolizing a lot of the space, and they couldn't, the kids had to practice at different pools and had to find different spaces to swim, which is a shame because they should all have their practice. They should all be able to practice there. And then Archbishop Wood also didn't have a place to go. They had to split their practice time. So I'm not sure that Tenet's pool is big enough to do what the community wants the pool to do. But like this company, I'm looking and I know they have listed that natatoriums is a thing that they do, but when you actually look at what the projects that they've done, I don't see any pools on there. So am I wrong in thinking that maybe we should have a company that specializes in this?
Actually, Tara, that's a good question. There's
Right,
two
point-
things that
point of
EI
order.
Associates I have experience with. What?
We really should make the motion before we have the discussion.
He asked if there was any questions.
Yeah.
This is my question.
Yeah.
Is that not a?
No, I think the questions are good.
Okay.
But I think procedurally, we should make the motion before we have the discussion.
Do you want to poll
Yes.
2A?
I would like to pull this one. Is that what I do? I pull
Yes.
this and then we discuss. Okay.
You pull this, we vote on B, then we come back,
Make the motion.
make
on-
the motion on A, and then we go into discussion, is the procedure.
Okay, so we're gonna pull A. All right, so we're gonna just vote on B. I'll read B. 6.2B, rescinds band trailer bid number 2019-02, previously board approved on September 12, 2018.
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any questions? Do I have all yeas?
All in favor, say aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? It's 8-0. Okay, so now we're back to the other one.
So you have to read
You
it.
need to make
I
a
have to read it. All right. So 6.2A, approve a new item. Approves the award of architectural engineering services swimming pool assessment and feasibility study, RFQ 2019-03 for Klinger Middle School, Log College Middle School, and William Tennant High School to EI Associates, direct cost not to exceed $25,950. Okay, so we're back where we were.
It was seconded by Mr. Miller.
Go ahead.
Okay. If I could answer something of what you said, and that is, EI Associates has a subcontractor who is familiar with pools and what pools need, and will be having that subcontractor come in, they'll be working under EI Associates to do that. Right now, we told when the group was here that we would evaluate and look at the pools and see what they needed. And that was the two middle schools. And I also lumped the high school because I didn't want to, in a year or two or three, all of a sudden have a problem with the high school, and then we don't have any pools, depending upon what we do with the middle schools. So I wanted to make sure. So it's about roughly $8,000 and change for each of the pools for them to come in. This went out in a bid, and this was the lowest responsible bidder. We either reject all bids or we accept this one. That's the only choices that we have, because you can't accept any other bids that are higher than their bid by law. I think, anybody want to?
Well, I guess, could Tara's question hinge on the question of whether or not the company in question is responsible?
Well, the
I'm
other
just-
company didn't have a pool group come in. Go ahead.
So Tara, I have worked with EI Associates down in Ben Salem. Dr. Ball, and Chris have worked with them. While building of a natatorium or a pool or the inspection of existing pools is a specialized field. So they have this gentleman by the name of John Bray from Atlantic Aquatic Engineering who's going to augment their due diligence, their feasibility. John, I have worked with in New Jersey even, in a former life working for the state of New Jersey. He's a preeminent pool consultant, pool designer. So he'll get what we want out of us by speaking to the teachers, speaking to Dr. Polchuk, and other educators to talk about curriculum where we want to be. EI Associates, their expertise would be if the pool needs something from an infrastructure perspective, be it HVAC, be it mechanical, electrical, layout, how does it tie to the schools? Can it be reused? The two pools that are existing, can those two structures be reused? And they're also using more engineering for the MEP component, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So the comprehensive team has done pools. And if you wanted to go look at a most recent pool they did, the Ben Salem High School pool is now maybe 15 months old. So it's pretty cool.
One other thing that you said, and I will take exception to, I really don't care about Archbishop Wood and their swimming program. I'm concerned with Centennial, and Centennial, what they need, not what Archbishop Wood needs.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Pellegrino. I think this is going to be a very hotly discussed item in the community. I think it's more, the one item I've got more calls about anything in Upper Southampton Township because of Klinger. I do know who this company is. I know they've done a lot of work for school districts, and they're kind of like the only one you call if you really want to do a pool. I know they also did Hatboro Horsham nearby. The thing that concerns me most, keeping in mind that all they're going to do is advise us and probably advise us how to get back to the pools in the original condition they were in 60 or 50 or whatever year it was when those pools were first built. They're currently working on 10 projects in Pennsylvania with a total combined budget of $207 million, or an average of $20 million per pool. And that we just don't have. So what we're looking to them for, I hope, is just advice as to, is it feasible to do anything with the pools to get them back to where they were, and what will that cost? Then the board can begin its discussion. We're not obligated to follow their recommendation. What we're asking them to do is tell us realistically, what are we looking at and how much will it cost? And I think, as Dr. Pollock said, that $8,000 a school is a really fair price for what we're asking them to do.
Mrs. Brancato?
Dr. Pollock, I just have to make a comment. For you to say that you don't really care about the kids who swim at Archbishop Wood, we're trying to make our schools the center of their kids' social lives. Like in McDonald, we're trying to make it all encompassing. We have kids at Archbishop Wood that live in this school district, whose parents pay taxes just like I do, who maybe we don't owe it, they don't have to have the time, but shouldn't we try to be neighborly and allow them to use the facility that's here?
I'm worried about our school district and our kids, not some other kids who do not go to our school district.
Okay, all right, Mrs.
That's what
Mrs.
I'm
Brancato
talking
has the
about.
floor right now, so let her speak.
I'm saying, shouldn't we at least be kind to all kids, not just our kids? That was like really, you sound like it's their kids.
You just want to give
Let her
everybody
finish, please.
everything
No, I wanna
else?
give-
That's
well, Dr. Pollock, I would give everybody everything if I had it.
Well, we don't
Okay,
have
wait a
it.
second.
I didn't say you did. You said me.
No, I
I
didn't.
want to give everybody everything.
We have to stop
And
this
you're
back
right,
and
you do.
forth, please.
But all
And
I'm saying is.
Tara's next.
All I'm saying is.
Tara's next.
Maybe we could take them into consideration. I'm not saying push the Centennial kids out of that go to Tenant out of the way. I'm saying try to be neighborly. That's what I'm saying. I'm sure they pay for the facility use. Correct?
They pay a
All right,
portion.
Tara's next.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, they do not pay
Thank
the
you.
full share.
Tara, go ahead.
What are we like, hate Catholic kids or something over here?
All right, Tara's next, go ahead.
What was that?
That's good.
Come on, that's enough. All right, this is my moment of being chairperson, so Tara's next, go ahead.
I mean, I'm sure that when in the facilities committee, we can look at the pricing if we, go further with the pools, how much we would rent it out for and those kinds of things. I just with my comment, I just wanted to make sure that we were getting in this bid all of the information that we would need to make a good decision. So I like the fact that we're finding out how much it will cost to restore the 2 middle school pools. I like the fact that we're going to know what the condition of William Tennant's pool is. In addition to those two things, what would help me make a good decision would be able to know what the swim community needed in a pool and how much that would cost with what we already have, if that makes sense. So is it possible to do something to Tennant's pool, fix it a little bit, make a bigger space, and then get rid of the middle school pools? Can we do what the community needs us to do with what we already have? So that and I don't know how that works because I don't know anything about pools. But can we get experts in there to help us out with this and make sure that we're doing the most fiscally responsible thing that is in everyone's best interest? That's okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go. Oh, and then I'll go. You can go next. Okay. So I think I said this before when this first came up. Mrs. Schrader, who was on the board at the time, we were both like, okay, we can be different. We can have 3 pools as long as it's reasonable. And as we moved on, we saw it was moving to the point where it wasn't real reasonable. And as Mr. Miller just alluded to, wow. I mean, we're getting estimates, and every other district that's getting estimates. Pools are really, really expensive to fix. And pools went in schools back when the federal government was handing out money like candy, and it was great. Unfortunately, here's the situation we're in. We have 2 schools that were built back in the 70s when the federal government was giving out money for such things like candy. And it's going to possibly, and I'm not going to jump to conclusions, we'll finance this, possibly going to cost millions of dollars to do it. So this is really done a 360, and I always say the hardest thing for a board member is defending an idea against a local minority based on really obvious facts, right? So you can't go by something that happened 30 or 40 years ago in an old climate where people were financing things that you can no longer do anymore. And I know Tara's brought up, like other districts are able to finance programs, but in all honesty, Tara, they're financing the maintenance of the ongoing pool. They're not financing the $10 million that it takes to rebuild that pool, right? So, I mean, that doesn't go into the equation. So the thing is, if you go down the ladder here, even if for some crazy, say it comes in at what it's probably going to come in at, even if for some reason we were to approve it, and we were to go to referendum, and even if for some crazy reason the township were to approve it, which they probably, let's just say they would, and then we went and passed a bond, well, then our bond rating would be horrible. Anyway, you look at this, it's a lose, lose, lose. I mean, our bond rating gets killed. Our township's really not going to approve. I mean, so that's the things that you really have to explain as a board member that's to a vocal minority, the obvious facts. It's hard as a board member to do that, but yeah, these are the facts. It's probably not going to happen. But so we're going to get this study, but the study's more probably going to be, what are we going to do with the high school? Not probably what's going to happen at the middle school. Sorry. I hope everybody kind of sees that. All right, go ahead.
Well, pursuant to the question of the high school pool, I just like kind of to bring to a specific question Ms. Pellegrino's point and to some extent your point here about the high school pool. Will this, is incorporated in in this company's sense of what we're asking them to do is to look at Tennant's pool and give us possibilities for how it might, for example, be expanded to be bigger, to accommodate more usage that it will now incur as the only pool among the district as opposed to as it used to be one of three? Or is that not really part of the mission that we're giving them? That's my question.
I guess the mission would be open. Just thinking about the real estate of the high school itself, right? It's the pool and the gym for the most part. Well, the pool specifically is in the donut hole of the high school, right?
Yeah.
So logistically speaking, where does that real estate come from if you were to expand the pool? Rather difficult, I think. And that's just my experience of 30 years in construction, right? You can't make real estate. Can it run more efficiently? Could they eke out an extra lane based on how the configuration of the pool is? Possibly. And I think that's what they're going to be driven to look at. They're also going to be driven to look at the infrastructure of the current pool. What is the life cycle? Chris was talking about life cycle costs of the buses and some other items. Likewise with the pool, what is that life cycle cost? When we redid the high school earlier in the decade, we didn't do the pool, we didn't do the auditorium, other than some bells and whistles, and we didn't do the gymnasium. Well, at some point, the functional obsolescence of those structures is going to come into play. I think from this point, as Tara stated, we're going to be looking at the pool. Can it expand? I don't know. Can it be an added lane based on maybe changing the configuration of some of the structures on the periphery or outside the pool deck? Possibly, right? But that's what they're going to come back. They're going to come back to us. How can we better utilize the high school pool? What are the infrastructure costs to redo it? Or can one of the two pools at the middle schools be reused, or both of them be reused? Whatever. That's going to be a decision that the board will have to make when we get those three feasibility studies back.
All I'm really asking is, and I think you've answered the question, is like when they look at, I mean, because, the point here seems to be, I think everybody agrees, you want a pool situation where the needs of the swimming community can be served at the cheapest possible cost, whether that's one giant pool at Tenon or three smaller pools across or whatever it is, right? So I just wanted to know, like, what is their, in this $25,000, like, how flexible is their mindset? And I think it sounds like they're going to be as flexible as possible.
They're going to be as flexible
in presenting
as possible.
those
I believe the
solutions.
RFP was written well enough to get us three things. What are we doing with the pools? What can we do with the pools? And what would it take to get them either back in a condition to use, as Mr. Miller said, or not? So those are the three metrics by which we're expecting this consultant to come back to us with.
Dr. Ball and then Mr. Miller.
If I can just kind of, from the administrative perspective, the study will help us understand how to maximize the pool at the high school as part of that study. Because currently, all the constituents, including Archbishop Wood, are swimming in the high school. It's also important to realize that the middle school pools have been closed for a couple years now, and people are figuring it out, right? So what used to happen isn't happening now. But we are continuing, and it's very important, we are very interested in continuing to be as good a neighbor as we can. We have to take care of all the kids on our watch. And the study is most important to the high school to see if there is some room for growth, but also to ensure that this pool doesn't go down, right? Because this board had spent a lot of money to get the middle school pool heaters fixed when I first got here. And we did that work, and pipes collapsed at Klinger, and we got logged back up, but then the ceiling collapsed, and someone got hurt. It was pretty ugly. And so we don't want a tragedy on our watch. First and foremost, we don't want a tragedy. And that is the number one thing we are hoping for from this study. If we were to fix the pools, how do we ensure that they will stay safe, right? And how do we, return them to their late 50s glory is another question, which they will also answer. But we are using the pool. Robert has worked extensively with the constituencies to try to get to as close to fair as possible to make sure that everybody continues to have access to a good pool, right? And that's important to us as your administrators. But we're very concerned from a safety perspective first, and this study will be very helpful with our decision-making around safety of individuals on our watch.
Okay, Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Yeah, right now, we don't know enough to exclude anything. For the benefit of the newer school members, and I promise after December I won't call you the new board members, but the high school pool was not built new at the high school. We had a new academic wing, but the athletic wing is renovated, and there was some restoration work done at the pool, but we knew at that time, 10 years ago, that we were not renewing the pool, we were renting more time. This is going to be a very difficult conversation to have, and we've been very lucky as a school district because among the 500 other school districts, or 499 other school districts in Pennsylvania, not many of them have pools, certainly not three. Haverford School District, for example, doesn't have a pool. They have to rent space from the local YMCA. So, these are all things that will come into play once we get an idea from somebody who knows much more about pools than anybody in our close group right now.
Anybody else? Mr. Burdick.
I just wanted to read two sentences from an addendum and the actual RFQ, so you knew that the concerns that were raised were already in the scope of work. And this is just like one sentence out of 31 pages of scope. The selected professional A&E firm will provide to the district advice on how to best utilize these assets. And then it goes on and it lists a bunch of stuff. After we had a mandatory pre-bid, we accepted written questions, we responded in writing. First question, does the district have a clear vision regarding program requirements related to aquatics? The answer was no. This will be a discussion item between the selected consultant and the representatives of the district. So just to allay the concerns that were raised this evening, I think we covered that pretty well in the RFQ.
Okay, go ahead.
So I would like to, as I scroll to the end of the document, I see that this group actually did the Wilson School District pool, which was one of the really spectacular ones in the state. So I'm sorry for challenging you on that. It is at the end of the document. Here it is. They did a good job. But I guess my question would be, when we set up those goals, I think it would be important to talk to the people that use the pool here in Centennial and find out what it is. And I know that it's already been mentioned you're doing this work. Find out exactly what they need and then be able to tell the people that are coming out to do this what it is we want, instead of saying that we're not sure. Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, we all good? All right, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? 8-0, thank you.
Okay, community comments. Anybody from a vast audience out there want to make a comment? Seeing none. Next meeting of the Committee of the Whole will be Tuesday, November 27th. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Oh, wait a minute, before we do, anybody else?
Oh,
have
sorry, too
anything
late.
For the good of the cause? Anybody else? Anything? Okay, can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.